I never met my mother. She died in the labyrinth during a war that 8 decades before humanity finally won it, and when they carried the survivors out, I was still an infant drinking a monster's milk instead of hers. That's what raised me. That's what I've spent my whole life since trying to prove isn't what I am. They call people like me dungeon babies, pulled from the labyrinth as infants, raised on monster's milk, too strong to count as normal anymore. I was the one who wouldn't go back down there, the only one whose real power nobody had ever seen. Then a film crew found me and told me the plan, film the second floor. I hadn't agreed to that. The guards kept promising they'd avoid conflict, protect us, do their job right. Geyser wasn't some quiet neighborhood, they said, only half joking. I'd learn later that while we stood there making small talk, something nearby was already being torn apart. Then someone shouted, pointing at movement coming straight for us. It was an underbeast, already bleeding, the kind you'd find on the first floor of Geyser, hurt, not hunting. I told them not to shoot, that we didn't need the fight. Nobody listened. The guards opened up anyway, said they needed to earn their pay, and put it down right in front of me. Afterward, the guards laughed it off for the camera, bragging that anything that moves dies when you shoot it, like the labyrinth was nothing but paper targets. Someone mocked me for freezing up. Then we all heard it. Something out there had heard the gunshots too, and it was hunting. I didn't run. I said we fight. Turned out the money was the whole point. Kill 2 of these things and split 10 million between them, camera rolling the whole time. Fine by me. I told them to do as they liked since they had the weapons, then pulled the unarmed ones aside. Follow me, I said, and split us off from the shooters for good. The rest of them didn't get it. No more filming, I said, we're leaving. One of them worked out loud why I never came near the labyrinth in the first place. Coward, that's the word she landed on. I let her think it. Someone else wanted to go back for the shot, insisting we'd wasted too much money to quit now. We had to go quiet. If the others noticed we'd split off, that was it. The predators had already heard the gunshots, and the one we killed first was still bleeding out as bait. Someone in my group turned on me. You let them die knowing this. I did. Warning them would have gotten us all killed instead. The blood was already on their clothes, not mine. I thought we'd shaken it until the growls multiplied. A whole pack of wolf monkeys had already caught up to us, first-floor monsters that had no business swarming us like this, which meant one ugly question. Had they known exactly where we were the whole time? I didn't wait for an answer. I dropped in swinging before they could close the circle. I told the requester flat out, don't expect the fight of a hero, just the pace you'd expect from a dungeon baby. That was enough. A few ribs cracked taking a hit, but I got her clear. Safe, she rounded on me. Why had I let the others die? I didn't answer that. Some things you don't explain to the person you're protecting. Once we stopped running, she came at me, hired as a guide, not a guard, and people had still died on my watch. That's just what Geyser does, I told her. She wasn't wrong that her guards ignoring my calls got them killed, so why save her? Simple, a dead client doesn't pay. Then the ground ahead froze us both, a labyrinth emblem. We'd wandered straight into it. My arm was broken, and hers might have been worse. I doubted she'd have survived that fall. Worse still, I dropped straight into the labyrinth's center, an abandoned ruin with no sign of life. Then something huge opened its eyes in the dark and hit me faster than I could brace for. Torn open and bleeding, a voice told me I was the one who'd inherit whatever waited beneath. I opened my eyes and couldn't believe it. I was alive. The venom had definitely spread. My arm had been shattered, but somehow both were gone. My whole body healed clean through. I dragged myself up and found her lying nearby, barely breathing. No first aid kit, no one else around for miles. Whatever fixed me, I didn't think it was luck. Yoonju, hold on a bit longer, I told her. We're almost there. I got her out. Hours later I was home, watching my own rescue play out on the news. 9 people went into that dungeon, 7 didn't come back, and the reporters didn't even know my name. Fine by me. I'd already collected my fee, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. Hyunji, my kid sister, burst into tears the second she saw the money. I told her to use it for her wedding too. Don't ask where it came from, I told her. I didn't do anything wrong. Then my father walked in, and one look at his face told me he already knew exactly where that money had come from. My father wasn't buying my convenience store excuse for a second. We're not related by blood, he said, grabbing my collar, but don't think that means I can't tell when you're lying to protect us. All I could say was sorry. He made me take the money back, told me I was still family whether I liked it or not, and sent me off to bed like nothing happened. People adopted dungeon babies like me for the money the government paid out. Some of us ended up abused for it. I got lucky. I landed a real family. The only friction lately was covering Hyunji's wedding. Then out of nowhere, this strange mark on my hand lit up green like a game menu, Naga's Labyrinth, ownership pending. I had no idea what that meant. Did some abandoned labyrinth actually pick me as its master? Before I could even process that, the panel flared, the air ripped open like glass shattering, and it just pulled me straight through. 1 second I was standing in my room. The next, I was somewhere else entirely, familiar almost, but not quite the same place I'd nearly died in. And there it was again, the same thing that tore me apart the first time, faster than my eyes could follow. I had nothing on me, no weapon, no armor, just my bare hands and whatever force I could throw. It saw through every trick I had inside of a second and put me right back on the ground. I needed a weapon, fast. Then mid-fight it just stopped, called me the labyrinth's new master, said something about a throne, wished me luck, and vanished, leaving me screaming at empty air that I hated labyrinths, that I only ever went near one for Hyunji's wedding money, that this was the last thing I needed. And then I was back in my room, right as Hyunji knocked, asking if we could talk. I stumbled back through the same tear in the air that had dragged me under, half convinced my body had shattered somewhere inside, even though nothing looked broken. Hyunji banged on my door before I could think straight, and I lied through my teeth about the sweat, letting her rib me about a hobby I'd never actually had. Hyunji thought she owed me an apology for dragging me back into that place, and I brushed it off, told her not to worry. Then it hit me. My coat, holding every cent of her wedding money, was still lying somewhere inside the labyrinth. I told her to wait outside. I was going back in. Hyunji's money was all I could think about. When she caught up to me, I played it off, told her I'd just gotten swept up in some new game and blanked on everything else, then asked if I could keep this hobby going. She bought it completely. Watching her walk off happy, all I could manage was a quiet sorry. Back inside, I found my coat all right, ripped open, everything still there except the one thing that mattered, Hyunji's money. Then that voice came again, needling me about being recognized as master, like this was some kind of test. I had no patience left for riddles. What kind of thief breaks in and steals cash but leaves everything else untouched? I was furious, all that risk for nothing. Then a marble surfaced in my palm, humming with the same energy as the mark on my arm, and a panel offered me something new, synchronized with the labyrinth, and its full information would unlock. I didn't care about power. I just wanted Hyunji's money back, so I figured, why not? Pressing yes felt too easy, like I was letting myself get swept up in the same pull that drags every dungeon baby back to that place. I almost talked myself out of it, figured digging through the ground myself would be faster. Then the system spoke. My claim was confirmed, qualified as heir to the Naga's throne. Synchronization began before I could take it back. A voice rang out in my skull, reorganizing the labyrinth itself around me, and the ground gave way. I fell straight into it, same as before. When I hit bottom, I was standing in a throne room that hadn't existed an hour ago. Synchronization complete. All I could say was, it's better than before. I just didn't know yet what that would cost me. The gate hadn't changed, same crooked arch marking the labyrinth's mouth. I stepped through anyway, chasing money I couldn't afford to lose. Waiting inside was the same horned little imp who'd mocked me before, snarling that I dared come back. It wanted a fight. Fine, I wanted my sister's wedding money back, and I wasn't leaving without it. In the wreckage of the fight, something red and hard came loose from the demon's grip, a down gem. Those things only turn up buried in Geyser's depths or hidden in rare plants, and people die trying to dig them out. A piece the size of my thumb could be worth tens of millions of one. I was holding a small fortune. Then I looked again. There wasn't just one, 2 down gems knocked loose in the scramble. I hauled them out of the gate with me, still catching my breath. Whatever this labyrinth was turning into, it had just paid me better than any job ever had. Then the system hit me from nowhere. A message flashed that I'd sacrificed one of the gems, that its worth was already being poured into repairing the labyrinth, upgrading it whether I agreed or not, on whose command. I never gave that order. But the countdown was already running. I had 22 hours to push my own labyrinth's rank higher, ready or not. 4 days later, Hyunji's wedding went perfectly, paid for by the down gem I quietly sold. 18 million won after haggling I never told her the real source of. Then the labyrinth pinged again, upgrade complete, rank 2 now rank 1. I opened the gate to check what had changed, Yunju at my side, and found a room that hadn't been there a week before. Naga Nest, the system called it, new territory unlocked by the upgrade, colder and rockier than I'd pictured for reptiles. I barely had a second to look around before something came screaming out of the dark, a dungeon beast in my own labyrinth out of nowhere. The message caught up a beat later. Naga workers had spawned in the facility, and they were already on me. The The Naga workers just waited on my word. Weird, but I was their master now. I sent 3 to scout and map the labyrinth, the rest to dig storage. Inside an hour they'd carved out a solid room. Then a scout party returned with just 1 worker. I panicked, thinking I'd gotten them killed. Turned out it was normal, even an honor, since it came back loaded with spoils. Sifting through the spoils, I found only rusted junk from Jaiser's war days, but proof no one been down here in years. Then a worker unearthed another downed gem. Get every one of these, I said, already counting the payout. Then it hit me, if I left to cash it in, who'd guard this place while I was gone? I fed 1 low-down gem and 2 of the weakest ones into an altar, trading them for raw labyrinth energy instead of cash. Millions gone for mere possibility. I nearly laughed at myself. But standing there, I finally got why dungeon babies obsess over places like this. It's not just money. Once you've stepped inside, staying safe on the surface stops feeling normal. Truth was, it wasn't really about the money. It was boredom. Plain, ordinary boredom. I'd tasted danger and treasure inside Jaiser, and normal life above ground couldn't compete. So half joking, half not, I named myself the Naga's king, right there in the dark. Told myself I'd bring this empire glory big enough to cover the whole of Jaiser. Then I raised my hand and summoned Naga. A menu opened up, the only units I could summon to defend the labyrinth for now. A Naga soldier or a Naga maid, and apparently there was even a maintenance fee to worry about. I summoned one of each. The soldier looked solid, tough enough to survive to the 5th floor, but the maid came out heroic rank, absurdly rare odds. I just stood there, heroic. The moment Dominique appeared, that glare wasn't even the strangest part. It was hearing her voice land straight inside my skull. Master, she said, please tell me what to do. Telepathy. My own summon, talking to me like I actually knew what I was doing. I didn't, but I wasn't about to admit that. So I laid out the whole situation for her, bound to a dungeon nobody else could see, playing king to creatures that used to be my nightmares. She barely blinked, asked permission to check the map herself, and spotted a lode in a downed gem plant before I'd even finished talking. We set up a gathering station in a stalactite cave right on the vein. My Naga maid was already smarter than me. We claimed the ground as labyrinth territory. While we were at it, free gems just for standing there, since the plants grow back on their own. Then we hit a mark on the map, wild beast territory, big and blocked off in red, sitting right on land I now technically owned. Dominique just lit up. Incredible, she said, for dungeon baby to already think like a lord. I told her straight I wasn't giving up my life topside for this. She got it, but didn't sugarcoat the rest either. No core yet meant no swarm coming for me, but Jaiser wouldn't stay quiet forever, and every unit cost down gems only I could pull from the altar. So I asked the real question, what if I'm not good enough? Nagas might rebel, she said, but none would ever be foolish enough to move against a master ruling all of Jaiser. Back up top, I dropped a down gem on the broker's desk like it was nothing. He about lost it. Where'd I even get this? How was I surviving down there solo? He filled me in on why gems had gotten so scarce. Wolf monkeys were pushing up to the 1st floor now, and Jaiser's remaining explorers were bailing. Then he tried to sell me on a job, hell spiders, holed up underground at the Paju gate, loaded with down gems and mean enough that even high rankers wanted backup. I turned him down flat. I wasn't here to be anyone's muscle. I already had a dungeon to run, and he had no idea how true that was. He wouldn't let it go, brought up my family, my sister's wedding debt like guilt was a sales pitch. Something in me snapped. My fist went straight through his wall. He froze pale, staring at me like he'd just remembered exactly what a dungeon baby was capable of. Did you run a background check on me? I asked. I already knew the answer. He backed off fast, hands up, explaining himself. Every dungeon baby he dealt with was basically a loaded weapon with nothing left to lose, so of course he dug into my past. He warned me, dead serious, that he'd seen what happens when one of us finally goes psychotic. I told him it wouldn't happen again, meant it, and walked out. Down gem money headed straight to my account, my life above ground still mine to protect. Then the dream came back, the one that always did. People screaming, running, hell spiders swarming out of the dark faster than anyone could fight. Someone begged me to save them. I couldn't. All I heard was one furious voice demanding why, before a shadow towered over everything and answered with a name, Duke Jaiser. I jolted awake, chest pounding. Dominique, my Naga maid, was right there asking if I was okay. Just a dream about the past, I told her, nothing to worry about, all behind me now. Around us, the newest Naga workers just stared, like they weren't sure what to make of their jumpy new master. Truth was, I liked them now, strange, considering I was raised on monster's milk in the labyrinth myself. Hell spiders were still far off, but deeper floor beasts were another story. When I asked Dominique for our upgrade status, the countdown hit 0, the labyrinth jumped to its 3rd rank, new construction unlocked, 6 fresh workers added, the core itself reforged. That core was the labyrinth's heart, destroy it and everything shut down. All our power ran through that single point, an obvious weak spot, though anything lost could still be rebuilt if we held the line. I barely had time to think about that before the alarm hit. A swarm of horned rats was charging straight for us. 20 of them hungrier than anything they'd hunted before. I figured I'd need every Naga soldier I had until Dominique stopped me. 1 soldier could handle 4 horned rats alone, a warrior or priest doubled that, an archer tripled it, a mage matched 5. Just watch the melee. Relieved, I summoned a soldier and 2 warriors. They came out stronger than I'd hoped, strong enough that even wolf monkeys felt beatable now. Then I noticed 1 worker off by itself, oddly small. Dominique explained, strong enough Nagas sometimes birth stunted subspecies like it, sluggish, low on will, but somehow no slower at the job. I just stood there thinking about what it could have been. Dominique wanted to discipline the runt for lagging. I said no, gather every worker, even the new ones, for this. Nagas prize honor, and this was our labyrinth's first real battle. Hiding them from it felt wrong. I promised no harm would touch them, that I'd shield them myself. Then came the fun part, forging each of them a weapon. Forward Nagas, I called out, and the whole army answered, soldiers, warriors, workers, Dominique at my side. Those rats had picked a fight with the wrong labyrinth. I grinned, cracking my knuckles. They'd walked straight into a snake's open mouth, and they were about to find out exactly what that meant. What I didn't know yet was that this swarm had a leader, a horned rat named Tretch, sharper than the rest and sick of digging tunnels while bigger things ate his own. He talked his tribe out of hiding, hit the snake cave, wipe out every Naga inside, and eat well enough to grow real horns. No more digging. This was their war now too. 20 rats came at us screaming to kill everything, even a Naga hatchling they stumbled on mid-charge. I told my army one thing, prove your worth, leave none alive. My warriors sprang a trap right into the swarm and half of them dropped on the spot. 1 rat lived through it on purpose. I looked him over and asked if he liked how that went. That survivor was Tretch, still griping about being dragged in for boring digging talk. Born to dig or get eaten, he said, no room for anything braver. So I dangled a lie in front of him. Any rat smart enough could become an owner of the labyrinth, just like me. His whole tribe started chanting his name around 1 word, marble. Word tore through the rats fast, swallow that marble, and Tretch would get strong enough to protect them all. No more getting eaten for sport, no more bowing their heads and calling it fine. Riding that hope, Tretch broke off alone, screaming he'd win his brother's freedom, and charged straight for my labyrinth's core. Dominique saw it happening and called for me in a panic. While Tretch made his run, one of my Naga warriors cut through the line meant to stop him, snatching a fallen soldier's spear without breaking stride. Tretch kept screaming about getting his revenge on the owners and kept moving anyway, past blade after blade, dead set on reaching that core no matter how many of his own got cut down getting him there. He actually got there. Tretch sank his teeth into the core trying to eat it whole and left an honest dent with nothing but a rat's jaw. That told me exactly how much damage that thing could take if something with real weapons ever got that close. My own spear, still in Dominique's hands, would have done far worse. Barely, he'd almost broken through. Once their leader fell, the swarm's nerve went with him. I'd worried for nothing. They were barely stronger than my own workers. Hearing they'd been bred into servants just like the dungeon babies in the old war turned my stomach more than the fight did. And somewhere out past this scrap, I learned there was something bigger still watching, fast, balanced, built to actually hurt me. While my Nagas held the line, someone was watching from outside the labyrinth, a hooded stranger, sizing up my whole force floor by floor. 1 heroic soldier, 4 ordinary troops they counted, guessing I didn't even know how to use them right. Someone deep in shadow with a scrying eye called it a dragon's blood gone stale, and admired the view like I was already beaten. I only found out later that we'd won Tretch's charge and his tribe's collapse earned my labyrinth its first real title. But Dominique wasn't celebrating. Those rats had broken straight into my own quarters. If they'd wanted the core or her instead of loot, it could have ended very differently. Weak is what we still were. Defenses came first. So I made the call, no more scraping by. We'd turn the wreckage into a treasury, and this place into a fortress built by our own hands, something worth being remembered for. Days passed. The rats' bodies and weapons went into Naga bellies and my storage, cutting our upkeep. I sent workers into the caves to mine, others out to harvest, everyone earning their keep. Then I stepped away from the labyrinth entirely, back into the world, to an old broker who paid for what I dragged out of Jaiser. Horned rat horns sold like antlers. No down gems this trip, which stung because without them I couldn't summon anything new. He still had that hell spider job on offer. I still wasn't ready to take it. He wanted a level for the paperwork, so I told him what I actually knew. I was born and raised inside the labyrinth of one of the Jaiser dukes, way down where the Great War never reached. That stopped him cold. Dungeon babies from that deep were basically rumors. He looked at me like he was staring at Korea's strongest, not some broke mercenary asking for grunt work. So he broke it down for me. Dungeon babies are ranked by the floor they were raised on, floors 1 through 3, tougher than any grown man, 4 through 6, strong enough to headline the action movies, 7 through 9, monster territory owners nobody argues with. Past floor 10, the war never even reached, deep floor, he called it, cosmic horror territory. My number came out to 12. He didn't sugarcoat it, barehanded. My whole body was one big weak point. Still, if I wanted real pay, I'd have to register my level lower than it was. Fine by me. Money was money. He promised gear from storage and a schedule by text, then asked for my ID card. I didn't even know what that was. I told Tretch's rats they'd be remembered as legends, the least I owed them. Back in the labyrinth, down gems trickled in, a subdued beast got broken down for parts, and my green worker's true form was revealed, a heroic Naga archer. Then the hard part, I told Dominique I'd be gone 2 weeks, off to the hell spider subjugation, portal sealed the whole time. That portal was the same one I'd first stumbled through, still standing open behind me. Staring at it now, one question nagged at me, could I even adjust its size? If I could shrink or widen the thing at will, that changed everything about how I moved between worlds. At Paju Gate, I fell in with the Hell Spider expedition, 22 of us, 7 on the assault team, the rest ordinary explorers. Our commander Lee Junyoung laid it out cold: subjugate the spiders infesting the 2nd floor, collect the down gems, be back in 2 weeks. She lined us up by level, and the gate ground open. We'd barely moved before someone screamed. A whip-tailed lizard came out of the rock, tongue whipping, tail like a club. Aim for the armpit, not the back, someone shouted, and the team scrambled to answer. Cheap bounty, ugly fight, and I remember thinking, so this is what passes for an easy start down here. The whispers around me weren't kind. Most of these explorers were selective picks a decade ago, but the good ones got rich and left. These were the ones drowning in debt, fighting because dying up top to collectors wasn't any better than dying down here. Then one of them stopped moving. Junyoung barked to aim for the wounds. Too late, he was already dead. Junyoung caught up with me after, said my form was good, too good for a rough-skinned lizard like that. I stayed quiet. Then came the real message: stick to the orders, stop showing off. Strength like mine, wasted here, might not be there when we needed it for the fights normal explorers couldn't survive. I told her not to worry. I meant it. We left the dead man's body behind, bait for beasts, Junyoung said, and no one blinked. I couldn't help thinking a dungeon baby would have gotten a very different send-off, not that it mattered to me. A week later we reached the 2nd floor of Jaiser with barely a scratch between us, hauling down gems by the fistful, and already asking how many more of these things were waiting. 200 ahead, thin pay for a spider hunt, until someone mentioned the down gems, fist-sized, worth a fortune if the yield ran heavy. Then our scout came back shaking, saying the tracks out there were torn up like a battle had already happened. Gems started falling out of the dark above us, except nobody could move to catch them. What was hanging up there wasn't a gem. It was a person, one of 10, we realized, strung up by something far bigger than the job we'd signed for. Regroup now, someone shouted, and then Junyoung went dead quiet behind me a beat too late. We slammed the camouflage barrier up and dove for the bunker, praying the light held. The whole nest broke loose at once, spiders crashing against our shield wall while I went in swinging. That's when I heard my own name screamed out loud for the first time in months, Young-ho, from a teammate getting dragged up into the dark. Toss her the line, somebody yelled, and we hauled her back before it could pull her under. The last spider went down under a boulder and someone muttered it again, Young-ho's clean up, like it was becoming a joke. Fine by me. Less fine for the guy next to me, who got clumsy for 1 second and paid for it, launched clean off his feet with a shout while another spider reared up looking for seconds. I dove in without waiting for an invitation, and one of my teammates snapped that I'd taken my sweet time fair, I guess. I tore through the swarm fast, careful to sound like just another warmed-up hunter. But when the last spider dropped, someone caught my eyes glowing in the dark and went quiet. He's level 7, him. We regrouped to check the wounded. Some hunters volunteered to net the spiders instead of finishing them off. Hell, I felt more warmed up than tired, like I'd been itching for this all week. But somebody worried aloud. Hell spiders were only ever recorded from war archives buried on the deepest floors. If what we just fought were the warm-up act, what waited below? Turned out those weren't hell spiders at all. No exoskeleton, softer hide, a different close-quarters style. Some smaller cousin or bait. Then someone noticed the webs. Thick, deliberate, nothing like what we'd passed on the way in. Spiders don't attack first, they wait for prey to wander into the trap, and we just walked straight into one. The entrance we'd climbed in through was sealed shut in silk. I felt it before anyone said a word. Murderous intent, close watching. I asked if anyone still had explosives. I wanted the blocked way open now. One of the guys laughed it off as a comic book cliché. The strongest enemy always saves itself for last. He wasn't wrong. The real hell spider was still out there, hiding. One teammate brushed it off, said we'd handle whatever crawled out. I told them twice already, what we fought wasn't the real thing. Then the dark answered for me, a shriek and a voice like nothing human, snarling that some microscopic bug had dared wound it, and promising nobody here was getting an easy death. It was the hell spider, full size, and it hadn't been sleeping, it had been waiting. I heard someone scream that it was real, heard the thing answer back in something like scorn, and then just the sound of it closing its jaws, crunch. That was the last thing I heard before everything went wrong. The real hell spider queen tore free of the dark, and a teammate went down screaming he didn't want to die. I got to him before the fangs did, too fast for the weakling I was pretending to be. My squad mate laid out the math, 2 babies, 1 queen, an exit we'd have to blast open ourselves. She eyed me and said I seemed awfully experienced with these things. While the bomb team worked, the others griped about dungeon babies picked off one by one, eaten for being careless. Then the spiders swarmed again and something in me lit up. This was what I'd been waiting for, and I went straight at them. My squad mate called me a crazy bastard, asked if I wanted to die. Maybe. She came in swinging right beside me anyway. One of the babies clipped me and I felt just how hard its shell was. More kept pouring out of the dark behind it. When one came at my squad mates from behind, I put myself between them and it one clean cut and it dropped. Somebody behind me whispered, "Is he a monster?" I didn't have time to answer. Something bigger was already climbing out of the wreckage. Both of them wanted a piece of me now, and I figured that was fair. I'd die if I kept hiding who I really was, so I let it go. Electricity I hadn't touched in years tore through them both in one flash. Back at camp, the bombs were finally set. All that was left was lighting the fuse before anything else crawled out of the dark. My team screamed that they'd found the exit. Get over here now. But you can't outrun hell spiders, not once they've locked onto your scent. So I told everyone to go on without me, promised I'd see them outside, and turned to face the whole swarm by myself. Laughing at me, "Cute, you've barely swept off a few nuisances." What none of them knew was that I had a card left to play. I cracked open the gate to my own labyrinth, the one I'd sealed away to keep training in secret, and let the light spill out. On the other side waited my throne, my Nagas, everything I'd built as Naga's king. My Naga army poured through, soldiers to guard the gate, archers to rain cover fire, warriors to take the second spider head-on, and me on the last one myself. But the real threat sat still in the dark, the true hell spider queen, too massive to move without collapsing the whole tunnel. I pulled Dominique back inside the gate to keep her safe. No need to panic, I told them. These spiders were barely tougher than the horned rats we'd already crushed. Annihilate every last one. My Nagas didn't hesitate. Warriors cutting through legs, archers loosing shots like cannon fire, soldiers holding the line at the gate. The decoys started falling fast. Better than I expected, honestly. My archers hit like artillery and my soldiers barely let a spider through. I even had time to gloat about the scratch on my cheek. Then Dominique's voice tore through my head, panicked. The queen was moving. The one thing too big and too smart to risk the tunnel had finally decided the risk was worth it. The system kept spitting warnings. Combat had blown past every threshold, my whole plan against the queen falling apart. Then came the losses. A Naga soldier gone, a Naga warrior mortally wounded. I screamed for Dominique. "Owner," she cried back, "the gate's in danger, there's too many of them." "Just hold on," I told her. "I'm coming." This bastard had turned its back on the gate completely, all its fury locked onto me. Running for Dominique now was too dangerous. If I let this thing loose, it'd tear through everything. So I gripped the one thing I'd been hoarding, a downed gem, and threw myself back in. The queen just grinned. "I finally understand why you're stronger than I remembered," it said. "Obvious," it sneered, "since you've been holding onto something this nice. It meant the gem. The fight cost me. I went down hard, bloodied, barely holding on, but I'd already made my move. Back at the labyrinth, the altar lit up, taking the down gem. I'd fed it. Naga summon, I roared. Out of the light stepped something new, a magician. A rare plus-rank Naga magician. Take down the spiders, I ordered. She answered with a spell that lit up the whole cavern, and for 1 second I thought we'd won. The small ones were obliterated, but the real hell spiders, still standing, completely unbothered. My new mage had traded punch for range, wide enough to clear the swarm, not strong enough to touch what mattered. I sized up the hell spider queen towering over me, and my options were ugly. Eyes, mouth, leg joints, sure, those were weak points, but she was too massive to reach any of them with a blade. Stabbing her eyes wouldn't touch the brain. Climbing into that mouth wasn't happening. I needed another way fast. Back in the labyrinth, Dominique gave the order, Naga on standby. We'd tear through the ceiling and dig our way out to the first floor. My soldiers balked, too dangerous, not enough firepower. She held firm, it was the only way. Meanwhile I turned and ran, the queen thundering after me. Good, follow me, you're about to become my first. From a distance my Naga watched me fight alone, gutted they couldn't lift a claw to help. It looked like I was digging my own grave, but Dominique read the truth. I wasn't burying anything, I was tunneling clear of whatever came next. Still, watching me struggle without enough power to finish her stung every one of them. My soldiers weren't sidelined by accident. I always went in first, kept them out of the kill zone so none of them died for my mistakes. That's just how I led. It nearly brought one of them to tears, but I hadn't forgotten them. Mid-fight, I called back to my Naga magician. How much mana did she have left? I had a use for it. Dragging something that huge upward through solid rock was brutal, but the tunnel gave me a path. I just had to keep her chasing. Meanwhile, the team I'd sent running felt the ground itself start trembling under them. No hard-class monster belonged this high up. Something was closing in and fast. Then the rock gave way, a new opening tore through between the first and second floors, and the terrain rewrote itself around it. I'd broken into a wide-open cave, first floor, lucky. No time to admire it. I screamed for my team to run and not look back, then turned to my real problem. How was I going to drop this thing? Magician. Now. A blast of magic hit from below, and for a second even I didn't know what it was. Not an attack, an ice spell, and a weak one. The queen froze mid-charge, thrown by an assault she hadn't braced for. But that ice wasn't there to hurt her. It coated the whole path above me in a thick, slick sheet. That ice was never going to hold her weight, that was the point. The ceiling gave, and she dropped, ice and all. Dominique caught me clean out of the air. I couldn't believe she'd read my whole plan on instinct. What I needed wasn't a trick, just one clean opening to land a hit I could never have landed in that tunnel. Now came the real work. Don't let a single spider slip away. Hold on, the owner will finish it off. One of my Nagas screamed as the queen closed in on us, so I did. Every bit of the current I'd hidden all this time, I fed into one strike, and the hell spider queen that had trapped my whole team just stopped. She was done. Victory, my Naga forces leveled up across the board, 3 ranked all the way to rare. My heroic mage, though, nothing. Dominique explained why. Mages need real combat experience to grow, and that only comes once I build a laboratory, which needs the labyrinth at rank 4. For now, I was sitting on exactly 2 down gems. The real haul was 6 good down gems off the queen herself, plus 44 more off her lesser spiders. 1 soldier lost, a price I hated paying but couldn't undo. I fed most of it straight into the altar to push the labyrinth's upgrade, keeping only a handful back so I wouldn't come home looking suspiciously empty-handed. The gate stayed exposed, though that meant more trouble was coming. I split the work. Some Nagas would gather the spider corpses, the rest would seal the tunnel entrances with boulders and ward magic. One worried we were running low on mana. Fair, we pushed hard. I told them 5 days, just long enough to finish the upgrade and keep up my other life. Good work, Dominique, your plan held, and your improvising covered the rest. 5 days for everyone, one last see you soon to my Naga army, and I stepped back through my own gate to the world where I was just Jinwoo. Then the jump, 5 days later, back at the Paju Gate expedition tent, my actual team greeted me relieved, annoyed, confused all at once. That's not the problem, someone muttered, and I knew I hadn't quite sold the story yet. One teammate shoved food at me before I'd even sat down, insisting she owed me for surviving. I told her I grew up in Jaiser, that she owed me nothing. She pushed back, so I asked for the dumbest thing I could think of, take care of this bowl, and called it even. What she didn't know, I'd already walked off with every gem those spiders had. Back at command, Lee Junyoung wasn't done with me. Tell me about the deeper floors, he said. I played dumb. Officially, the expedition failed, so don't expect compensation, he warned everyone. Unofficially, I was already at Beck's, unloading 12 down gems off Jicer's 12th floor for 400 million won, then pushing my luck, asking him to front me a secluded house and pretend I worked there. Beck about lost it when I laid out the plan, a fake jewelry shop, just cover enough to slip into Jicer without questions. He caved. Back through my own gate, Dominique was waiting, welcome back, master. But sneaking home every night to crack open a hidden portal was getting old. I needed a place of my own. Dominique fussed over me. Was I hurt, overworked, just tired, I said. The labyrinth's upgrade had finished quietly, the outside barely changed, but everything underneath had grown. Then she froze. A guest had walked straight in, waiting at the entrance. Word was this visitor made the rounds to every dungeon in Jicer. Whoever this was, they weren't nobody. A hooded goblin thing grinning ear to ear, the black merchant, bowed like I was royalty. Dominique warned me quietly. He already knew about my nagas and my hell spiders, and he ran the black market for this whole stretch of Jicer. Don't look easy to lowball, she said. So when he finally got to his point, I already knew it. I'm here, he grinned, to make some sales. My first instinct was to kick him out. Dominique shut that down fast. Cross a black merchant, and he'd spread everything he knew about us across Jicer. Better to play along, since deals like his came with rare goods too. So he showed off a squirming little thing in a bottle, a parasite, he called it, one high-ranked down gem to buy. I picked it up, turned it over, and started haggling. 5 down gems, final offer, that was all I had. Turned out the tradition was to take a merchant's first treasure straight into your own body, not keep it as some pet. I'd never regretted trusting that advice before, so I didn't start now. The parasite sank into my hand and I felt something shift, like I was drifting a little further from human. Not that I was ever that close to begin with. Parasite drama aside, I had a labyrinth to run. With Dominique's help, we pushed the upgrade I'd been putting off rank 3 to rank 4. New facilities unlocked, new units ready to summon, 6 fresh Naga workers on the job. Since my Nagas fought for themselves instead of me burning power summoning soldiers, we were growing faster than anyone in Jicer. Time to build, starting with a farm for them. I threw myself into building a real army, new defenses, a cattle farm, a bar by the Naga nest, but held off summoning more Nagas until I could afford it. A week of non-stop construction later, the nest expansion was done, cattle secured, soldiers rotating shifts. It finally felt like a kingdom, one bleeding down gems faster than I could earn them. No wonder the Hell Spider Queen went to war over territory. I needed more gems, so back down I went, but Dominique caught that I'd been staying underground too long. Truth was, I'd already moved out, alone now on some mountain ridge with no house or store in sight. I promised her a look at the surface someday, sent her off to rest, not knowing the parasite I'd swallowed had just finished settling into my body. Then it hit. The parasite was making its move, trying to dominate me. My eye caught fire from the inside, and I doubled over screaming, clawing at my own face like I could rip the pain out. Blood ran down my fingers. Whatever was happening to me, it wasn't finished. Turned out I wasn't alone up there. A hunter from the Hell Spider crew had tracked down my house, and she heard me screaming from outside. She burst in on me mid-transformation, face twisted, calling my cover name Jinwoo until I came back to myself. I caught my breath and apologized for the sight. Even I wanted to know what the hell that was. I lied, called it an old eye disease from the Duke Spider's labyrinth on the 12th floor. Bad excuse, dungeon babies from that deep don't come back alive. She pieced it together. I was from the deep floors, which explained how I knew so much about the Hell Spider. I let her think what she wanted. Turned out she hadn't come to expose me, she wanted me on her team. I agreed just until I got reacquainted with how much Jicer had changed. She laid out the plan, 2 weeks pushing into the 8th floor, 5 dungeon babies and 10 regular explorers strong. I couldn't help needling her. Last I'd seen this crew, they were running for their lives on the 2nd floor. She didn't flinch. That spider had just been strong. Fair enough. She left to gear up, warning me not to show up uninvited again. 4 days later, I stood at the Paju D gate, a cramped, subway-sized entrance compared to the big guarded gates, open to anyone who flashed ID and reported a head count. Word was a new 2nd floor path had broken open at Gate B, and it was already chaos, monsters spilling out. Damn. I fell back into my old cover, Kim Jinwoo, rejoining the team that once thought I was just a weak tag-along. The squad still ribbed each other over who screamed first and monster, but the warmth under it was real. Gearing up for the real objective, a 2-week push into the 8th floor, I got handed lead over the normal explorers without even asking. Back in my own labyrinth, the bar ran without me. My Nagas gossiped that Dominique, my heroic Naga maid, turned hysterical whenever I was gone, Rumor even had her hoarding a secret stash of things that reminded her of me. Down in the real dungeon, this crew moved nothing like the Hell Spider expedition. Careful, quiet, slipping past a pack of beasts instead of charging them. This team ran tight, dungeon babies and normal hunters moving as one unit, all thanks to our captain, Jiang Chansik. Despite being the lowest level among us, his detection ability sensed every living thing around us, hidden or not, a cheat skill by any measure. When I flinched at something only I noticed, the others just shrugged it off as a deep-floor dungeon baby's senses. Cover intact. We hit the entrance to a labyrinth abandoned since the Great War, wolf monkeys squatting on the only detour, so we went straight through instead. Chansik's detection read no real danger inside. Junyoung had the layout memorized, and I had no objections. I was already filing it away as a blueprint for expanding my own labyrinth back home. What I didn't know yet was that somewhere far off, an ancient dragon lord was making plans that would eventually reach me. A wounded subordinate named Demand needed weeks to recover. Sending the ancient dragons themselves would take 3 months, but one scout, branded imposter by his own master, Rikshasha, swore he could close that distance in 2 weeks, the same 2 weeks I had left in this dungeon. We reached the owner's room just hours in, no beasts, no traps, nothing. This labyrinth had sat dead since the Great War, empty enough that the military only bothered mapping the upper floors before flagging it for a future base. We bought what map we could from the Labyrinth Mall, set a motion sensor at the entrance, and made camp for the night. Bored, I wandered up to the throne some old dungeon master once ruled from. Funny, thinking monsters got treated like kings here. Then, unprompted, my parasite stirred, detection activated, my eye flaring crimson. I choked back a cough and cleared the room fast, playing off the flare-up as my old eye disease before anyone got a good look at what I actually was. Alone, I let detection run. No pain this time, just my vision bending strange, and it picked out something glowing on the altar that no normal eye could see. I closed my hand around it, not a down gem, but a labyrinth fragment, one piece of a set of 30, soaked in old dungeon energy. This dead labyrinth still had secrets left to give up. My eye caught it before I understood why, the parasite sharpening my sight again. I froze on a shape buried in the rock. Could it be? I dug it loose with my own hands, a down gem. Back home, meanwhile, 2 of my Nagas got caught red-handed skipping watch duty by Dominique. Turned out one of my attendants wanted to build herself a private room, but felt guilty doing it without asking me first. Dominique settled it fast, give her a room of her own, since she was too refined, apparently, to bunk in the nest with the rest. Dominique looked thrilled with the whole idea. I hadn't slept, spent the whole night alone digging up down gems and mapping ground I hadn't covered yet. Small hauls, low quality, but it added up and I'd have to come back through alone. Then the summons hit, something out there was calling every dungeon baby in earshot to gather. Trouble. Chansik's detection laid it out, 2 beast blocks choking the only way through, bats stacked 20 deep, monkeys 8 strong, maybe wolf monkeys at worst. He could read numbers and position, nothing more. Waiting for them to thin each other out risked pulling in worse predators. Trapped between 2 swarms, we had one option: fight. One of the guys cracked a joke about third-floor beasts being bugs, then caught himself remembering who he'd said it to. Silence. Chansik cut through it. No point waiting them out, let's just go in. I didn't hesitate. I'll take half, I said, and I meant it. 30 beasts poured in at once, and I heard someone mutter, "Today's the day I die." Then I got to work, 1 hit, 1 kill, over and over, my half of the swarm down before anyone else finished their first fight. My teammates just stood there staring. "Impossible," one of them said, "in 1 hit." A dungeon baby usually fights, however their home labyrinth taught them swing until something falls. What I did was different, clean, aimed, every strike landing on a vital point like I could see it coming. Watching me move, my teammates started guessing I'd clawed up from somewhere called the Marcus Labyrinth, a brutal, rare pocket deep in the 7th floor, deep enough to explain everything they were seeing. Chansik ran with it, deciding that'd be the cover story for Jinwoo, easier than admitting he had no idea what I really was. Fine by me, I still had a parasite to hide. Then I watched it hit Junyoung mid-fight, her stance going lighter, the monkeys around her suddenly crawling like they'd slowed to nothing. I'd held back in that fight just enough to look like I was keeping pace with Junyoung, so why did it feel like I'd given everything? The parasite had an answer. It had cracked open something dormant in me and sharpened my cover skill detection. Cutting into one of the beasts, I found its heart guarded behind its ribs. This thing wasn't just riding inside me, it was teaching me. Chansik was already making excuses for skimming 70% instead of the half he promised, said it just made things easier. The other explorers were calling me a hero built for war, joking I was becoming a god. Then the mood dropped. Another team was closing in, twice our size, splitting up to surround us. Chansik had missed them, too busy watching the fight. Everyone braced. Beasts weren't the only threat in Jaiser. The laws here meant nothing, and stealing another team's kills was just how things worked. 30 beast carcasses sat waiting while we stood there worn out. If Chansik's detection hadn't caught that rival crew stalking us, they'd have ambushed us. Now they just gathered, watching. Junyoung turned to me, half embarrassed to lean on me again. Of course, I told her. I like these guys. The one leading them, red-haired and grinning like a tiger, sauntered up first, Song Jonghul. Junyoung spat his name like a curse. He needled her about surviving the hell spiders, called it lucky, said she must have extra lives. When she told him to cut the bullshit and move on, he laughed. We have to pass through here to reach the lower floors, he said, so. He led the Exploration Association, government-backed, but really just a gang choking off labyrinth entrances. More teams belonged to it now than didn't. That's what happens when this much money is on the line. They called it a just cause. Really, it was a fight over gold. I didn't like them. The parasite weighed the crowd anyway. 9 dungeon babies, Jonghul a notch above Junyoung, the rest below floor 7. About 40 explorers stood behind him, weapons out, faces blank, like this was routine for them. If it came to a fight, I figured everyone on our side would get wiped out. Everyone except me. Then something needled at me. A pressure I couldn't place, crawling under my skin. Really, these guys were starting to get on my nerves. That pressure was killing intent, and it matched the weight of a Labyrinth King's. My whole body locked up. It was one of those monsters standing right behind me. Then Jonghul burst out laughing. Relax, just a joke, he said, delighted that little Junyoung had gotten so cute since he'd last seen her. She froze, humiliated. He kept grinning, said they must have had it rough with those spiders, like he almost meant it. Let's move, he told his crew. We don't touch little Junyoung's prey. Then to me, Junyoung and her friends can't even get their names on the association roster. I wouldn't sign with them if I were you. You look useful, though. Come find me if you change your mind. Not interested, I said. He smiled and walked off. Junyoung was shaking with fury. Calm down, someone told us both. Turns out I already was. With the 6th floor behind us and our hall secured, nobody argued when the team called it, not even about Song Jonghul, the rival who Junyoung admitted was once her own team's leader, back when they escaped the same labyrinth together. We gathered, turned home, and for once the trip back went clean. A week later we walked out the exit with everyone still breathing, which almost never happened. Back before the association cracked down, any dungeon baby could get hired out with 0 restrictions. That's why old expedition survival rates sat around 50%. Then Beck warned me about something worse. Human hunters, bandits who filed their teeth like sharks and prowled the tunnels robbing other teams blind, some rumored to be devils in disguise. But I hadn't come to chat, I'd come to sell down gems. Walking back through town, I couldn't shake the thought public opinion loved the association, but I wondered if Junyoung had her own reasons to hate them. I didn't dig further. It wasn't my fight, not yet. Then I stepped back into the labyrinth early, and Dominique, my heroic Naga maid, met me at the gate with news. A guest was already waiting in the pub, an elf. Underelves have no loyalty, no pride, I said as much, and asked why she'd even let one inside instead of throwing them out. Dominique admitted the truth. We had nobody left to scout the labyrinth. Our archers saw far but moved too slow, and production was already falling behind. An underelf might actually solve that. Fine, I judged this one myself. I found her waiting, white hair, gold eyes, ears sharp as blades. Dominique bristled instantly, snapping at her to show respect, but the elf just stared back in silence. Then she dropped into groveling, flowery speech, begging to be introduced to the great master. I cut her off. Speak plainly. She did, Rikshasha, an underelf mercenary. Then I asked her why she'd approached me with a weapon already drawn. It looked like she meant to test me with steel, not words. Dominique nearly attacked her for the insult, but I called her off. I've never liked flattery, and Rikshasha's honesty won me over. She admitted she'd had no way of beating me in a real fight, then listed her skills: scouting, searching, gathering information. Exactly what the labyrinth needed. I hired her on the spot. I gave Rikshasha the grand tour of my labyrinth, and she wasn't impressed. No traps at the entrance, the core sitting wide open. Sloppy, she called it. When she caught my workers taking a day off, I told her I'd rather rest them than run them into the ground. She just called me naive, a human, even as a labyrinth master. Fair enough. It was still my labyrinth, run my way. Dominique laid out the numbers, and they weren't pretty. Our down gem income barely covered wages, and every scouting run further out meant more beasts, more fights, more soldiers dead. We'd lost 2 in the last battle alone out of 42, and without our one healer, we'd have lost the whole squad. Something out there had gotten a lot more dangerous, and I didn't know why yet. Then Rikshasha flipped my whole understanding upside down. There was no real first floor here. Once I took the throne, the labyrinth had swallowed me and set me down somewhere else, the way masterless dungeons sometimes do to claim a new ruler. The entrance I'd used with reporter Yo out on the ridge had been an illegal path all along. I had no idea what floor I actually stood on. Not knowing what floor my own labyrinth sat on was ridiculous and dangerous if deeper floors meant real threats. I tracked Rikshasha down at the pub since she'd wandered the underworld longer than any of us. Dominique nearly threw her out of the throne room on principle. Rikshasha just smirked and told her to add a door if she wanted privacy that badly. I stepped between them before it got worse. Rikshasha admitted floors were a human concept born in the underworld. She'd never thought of it that way. But she offered something better, her own history from before I hired her. What she told me next killed my good mood fast. Right next door to my labyrinth sat the domain of the Flood Dragon King, a being that had survived the entire war of the underworld. The Flood Dragon King, she told me, was an ancient snake ruler who'd held that throne since before the Great War, stronger than my whole labyrinth combined, and only a day's walk from my door. The only thing keeping us alive was a rule enforced by the Blood Leopard, the region's apex predator. The Dragon King had already tried digging an attack route toward us and failed, buying us maybe 2 months. That's when Dominique turned on her. She'd worked for the Dragon King before, which made her a spy as far as Dominique was concerned. Rikshasha didn't even blink. She said she was just a mercenary, doing whatever job paid, and that right now, the job was mine. I brought in Rikshasha, the elf mercenary now scouting for me, and gave her one job: slip into Mactus's territory, count his forces, and learn which direction they'd strike from. It wouldn't be cheap, but I told her not to worry about the price. Dominique warned me the elf was hiding something. I already knew, I just didn't think it was loyalty to the enemy. Let her think we only had raw Naga soldiers, no down gems saved, nothing to fight with. The more they underestimated us, the better. But I'd learned something too. Mactus, the Flood Dragon King himself, had hidden through the entire Great War because humans once wielded a weapon that could actually kill him. Now a human sat on the Naga throne. Rikshasha promised to return in 3 days with a gift. Back on the surface, I called in an old debt with Junyoung, who still owed me for saving his life. As Jinwoo, my cover name on his team, I asked for a few things I needed. A week later, word came back from the depths. Enemy scouts had already closed in on my labyrinth, laughing off my Nagas as nothing worth fearing. The one leading them was Draken, insufferably proud of calling himself a descendant of dragons, even though his own soldiers snickered behind his back, remembering how he'd gone silent crossing the Blood Leopard's territory last time. Draken didn't care. He was already dreaming of taking Mactus's throne from my labyrinth, right until he spotted a Naga. His men gave chase and dragged the fleeing Naga worker back, and Draken demanded it lead them straight to the labyrinth. I wasn't about to let that slide. When he sneered about descendants of dragons dirtying easily, I stepped out and told him exactly who he was talking to. I'm the Naga King. Draken came at me himself, so sure of his bloodline he never saw it coming. I gave Dominique the signal, and my Nagas rose from ambush. He screamed about cowardice until he realized it was only workers standing against him, and his own soldier turned the insult on me for supposedly working them to death. His men jeered that even my lizards couldn't hold themselves together. Dominique didn't bother arguing. Workers and a servant, she said, were more than enough to deal with them, and gave the order. Fire. The blast tore through Draken's whole company before he understood what had hit him. What I didn't know yet was what Rikshasha was really doing down there. She'd seen the Flood Dragon's labyrinth for what it was: traps and mazes built to kill intruders. Workers worked to death for scraps, no paradise at all, and she reported every bit of it straight to Mactus, along with the one weakness that mattered. My down gems and my manpower were both running thin. Draken's company was already broken, but I wasn't done. My Nagas leveled a set of guns I'd quietly smuggled into the labyrinth, aimed them at what was left of his retreating soldiers, and I gave the order myself: fire. One of Draken's men scoffed. Lowly human weapons couldn't hurt them, right before a round tore into him. Panic spread. Fall back, warned Mactus, but they were already surrounded. Those guns weren't ordinary. They were illegal underworld-grade firearms, banned for how dangerous they'd gotten, the kind you only got through connections in the underworld like mine. Useful against soldiers, sure, though not exactly lethal, and Dominique had taken a real liking to them. Then Draken shrugged off a direct hit like it was nothing, not a scratch on him. He threw his head back and laughed, mocking every shot we'd landed. Weak, he sneered, calling my Nagas nothing. One of my own snarled back at the insult, but I stepped in before it could get worse. "I'll handle this one," I said. Dominique panicked, "Master," while Draken's grin only widened. "The king himself, huh?" Turned out blades did what bullets couldn't. I cut into him and he screamed for real this time. Dominique called out, worried, but I was fine. Up close, this guy had a body tougher than the hell spiders, real monstrous strength, and somehow the worst instincts I'd ever seen in a fight. I couldn't tell if he was joking or mocking me. Even with my parasite sharpening every sense I had, I couldn't find a single weak point on him. Then it clicked. Descendants of the dragons all shared the same flaw. "Bullshit," Draken snapped. "I have no such thing. That gap between your shoulder blades," I told him. That was going to be my next target. The moment he heard me name his weak spot, something in me changed. Draken felt it before I even moved, the air around me turning sharp enough to cut. He went quiet, and for the first time since this fight started, so did I. The instant his aura shifted, the ground shook and the air rattled. The real Draken was awake. I couldn't waste that opening. I threw everything I had into one strike before he could turn it on me. It landed, clean, right on the gap between his shoulder blades. He didn't even flinch to block. That worried me more than it should have. What I didn't know yet was what was running through his head. Mactus had sold him a lie, called this just some small labyrinth run by a nobody. Now that I'd found his one weak point, Draken panicked, dropped the tough act, and tried to fake a retreat. Too slow. Before he could finish the thought, I was already gone from where he'd last seen me. He bled, actual blood, first time I'd seen it, and it broke something in him. He screamed that he didn't want to die over and over until the tough dragon act collapsed completely. What crawled out from under all that posturing was small, pathetic, and begging, swearing he was just a low-level mercenary who'd taken Mactus's coin, nothing more. So much for descendant of dragons. Back at my labyrinth, my Nagas laid out the hall, Draken captured, dragon materials in hand. Killing him would have been easy, processing him wouldn't, since nothing short of my strongest attacks even scratched that hide. So when he begged to switch sides, I let him prove it. He swore the vow of a dragon, a binding oath dragonkind uses to guarantee a loyalty they don't actually have. Break the vow and a dragon dies instantly, in agony. What surprised us was that it worked on Draken at all, no wings, not even purebred, yet the curse still held. No nobility in him, I could tell, but that thick hide still had its uses. Days later, when he admitted the Flood Dragon King outclassed him and complained his wounds still hurt, I called that betrayal too. Rikshasha, the scout who'd cased Mactus's territory for me, couldn't believe what Draken had been reduced to. She and Dominique, it turned out, knew each other from opposite sides. The news was grim. The Flood Dragons were mobilizing a month out, and I still couldn't match a labyrinth decades older than mine. So Dominique proposed a gamble, subjugate the Blood Leopard, the apex predator whose reputation alone kept Mactus contained. It was a dangerous ask. Fail this subjugation and the whole labyrinth could pay for it. Rikshasha volunteered, so I left it in her hands. While she made her attempt, I had my own trip to make. Human weapons weren't cutting it anymore, not enough firepower, and hard to come by besides. Told my Nagas I'd be dipping into my own savings, and that I'd be back before Rikshasha returned. First stop, sinking the maps for the underworld's first 3 floors, which gave me a clean path to the abandoned labyrinth where I'd once stashed down gems. On foot, a 4-day trip, sprinting 9 times faster, and dungeon babies like me already outrun the baseline. I called on the parasite to mark every gem in range and poured everything into my legs. Time to move. I lost count fast. Every crumbling wall on that lowest floor spat out another lowest grade down gem, and I smashed through it hundreds of times without stopping. Ugly, grinding work, but every gem was one more soldier I could summon before Mactus's army reached my gates, so I didn't quit. I brought Dominique 435 down gems, all thanks to a parasite that made the trip almost too easy. Not enough to arm us outright for the coming war, but enough to gamble on. I dumped every gem into an upgrade, Labyrinth Level 5, full Grade 5 soldiers ready within the week. I spawned a Naga gatekeeper just to be safe. Then word came in. Mactus had scrapped the long march and ordered his siege beasts to tunnel straight at the Blood Leopard's territory a week out. Then the war would start no matter how it went for us. That's when my soldiers dragged someone out who didn't belong down there, a mercenary named Rikshasha, hiding inside my own labyrinth. Rikshasha handed over the map I'd asked for, and it was good enough that I saw a real shot at taking the Blood Leopard with what little I had left. I pulled my elites off labyrinth defense to lead the subjugation myself. She called the odds suicide. I told her not to underestimate my soldiers, and that was the end of it. 2 days later, rested and steady, Rikshesha agreed to guide the subjugation herself. I hadn't told her the map errand had really been a test. We marched out immediately. Once we reached the Blood Leopard's ground, I had every soldier go dead silent. The thing had ruled this territory for decades, and it would find us long before we ever found it. Then I felt it, a controlled, heavy killing intent right behind me. One wrong move and it would end me. That standoff pulled my mind back to the first real argument Rikshesha and I had, not about monsters, but about how I ran my labyrinth. She couldn't understand why I let my Nagas rest and eat well down here. I told her I was underworld born too, and I knew what I was doing. I laid it out for her plain. I protect my allies and kill my enemies, and I still couldn't tell which one she was. She'd worked under the Flood Dragon King before, sure, but she argued that a real spy would never have admitted that much. She swore everything she told me was true. I wasn't convinced, and I told her so, straight to her face. Then I asked if she'd ever heard of a parasite. She had one on her, and so did I. The day we met, I'd planted a fragment of mine on her, riding along on every trip since, including a tour of the Flood Dragon King's labyrinth. She saw me learn everything, and I still gave her another chance. She admitted she owed no one loyalty, she just wanted her freedom. The killing intent behind me wasn't some ambush I'd missed, it was the Blood Leopard itself, and I hadn't even noticed it closing in. That thing camouflaged itself mid-battle and moved faster than anything I'd fought before. I froze for half a second, and that half a second could have killed me. Its eyes locked onto mine. I can see you. Even knowing I was a labyrinth master, it still looked down on me, just a monster the labyrinth spat out, it said. It gave me one breath before the fight resumed. My guide noticed something else. The leopard was tapping power it had never shown before. If it went all in, I'd hold my parasite back. Then a second monster crashed in, and my nerves screamed to end this fast. One of mine begged to jump in and back up the Naga. I refused. Stay back. I didn't need help, and I wasn't about to let anyone look down on my soldiers. The parasite stirred against my collar, waiting for the word. Mid-fight, I caught enemy chatter I wasn't meant to hear. They were shielding a mage of their own, someone special to their king, holding the line until he arrived. So this wasn't some stray beast. It was an organized defense, waiting on backup. Then a spell tore through the chamber, and everything went white. In that instant, my soldier's mind flooded with memory, a kingdom he'd once ruled, a Naga labyrinth that fell after decades of war, and a vow he'd made to never let his people down again. That old promise was exactly what the ritual needed. The requirements were met, something ancient in him answered. He roared out the truth, eating him alive. What kind of soldier waits to be saved instead of protecting his king? Blue fire swallowed him whole as he swore we'd die together before he'd fail me again. And right there, mid-battle, his heroization began. The enemy commander stared at the wreckage in disbelief. Heroization wasn't supposed to be something you could trigger on command, and yet here it was. King of Naga, he said, sizing me up like a puzzle he hadn't solved. Truthfully, I wasn't sure how it happened either, but I knew this much for certain. There'd be no mercy left for him now. I roared at the leopard to quit hiding and actually fight me, but I was told that's just how they survive, weak-bodied and masked in invisibility while we swung at shadows. Worse, I wasn't just fighting anymore. My Naga magician had been struck and marked, too hurt to move, and I threw myself between her and the next attack. My Naga magician, already wounded and marked, bet everything on one last mana ball. I asked if she'd lost her mind, risking death like that. She just told me to clear the floor. She was about to blow the whole place apart. When the rubble crashed down, someone finally shouted that they'd spotted the Blood Leopard. That camouflage trick had kept the Blood Leopard alive through the entire fight, weaving in and out unseen. Not anymore. We finally boxed it in, and I remember thinking, there's a limit to how shameless a fighter can be, hiding instead of standing and facing us. We caught it, but before I could celebrate, the enemy commander sneered that this was only the beginning. The Blood Leopard finally broke and fled, terrified of us. My soldiers cheered, called me king, but I couldn't fully celebrate. We'd lost an ally because of my mistakes. So I told them straight, soldier or hero, you're all Naga to me, and whether we fight humans or gods, it's the same war. We lost a life fighting fearlessly. That makes them no different than any of us. I told him plainly, a righteous king owes his soldiers honest criticism, not empty praise, and he took it to heart. Then I gave him something no title could match, a name. I called him Guntus and named him general of the Naga army. He dropped to one knee and swore eternal service, calling me king of the Nagas. It felt earned. We picked through what the Blood Leopard left behind, tough hide, and a rare down gem carrying its own power. Guntus half joked that I'd been testing his loyalty. I told him he didn't need to suck up to me. Then we moved out, and hours later hit ground torn apart by war. The Flood Dragon King's army had already passed through, closer to my labyrinth than I liked. The Flood Dragon King's army wasn't 3 weeks out like I'd hoped, 5 days tops. Someone guessed I must have planted a parasite to spy on them. Truth was simpler, I, Young-ho, had lied. Every excuse I'd given about my abilities had been an act. Deception is a skill too. I only had one honest thing left to offer, one last real choice. What I got out of Rikshasha later was ugly. Mactus, the Flood Dragon King, had branded him an impostor in front of his whole court and choked him half to death for questioning a war he never chose. That was the night Rikshasha decided he was done being a dragon soldier. Back home, one of my newest Nagas, a jumpy recruit named Bantu, introduced himself to everyone in the hall, word for word repeating something private I'd only told him in passing. I let it slide. After the week I'd had, chasing down the blood leopard, I needed something to laugh at. 5 days, that's all the warning I had before Mactus's army hit my gate, but I wasn't walking in blind. Rikshasha had turned, and he handed Dominique everything he knew. I set Bantu to raise a watchtower and drill every soldier we had, then went to scout the ground level myself and lay a few surprises of my own. On the other side, I'd learned Mactus was making his own moves, summoning 2 of his best, Ajag and Urjag, both hero-ranked, and throwing them straight to the front. His order was short and cold: finish it before he had to show up himself. 5 days later, we stood at the gate with the plan locked in. 20 Naga soldiers, 6 archers, 4 healers, 5 mages, 2 gatekeepers, everything I had. Against us, 36 soldiers and warriors backed by a hero. They outnumbered us badly, but Rikshasha's intel said their army was slow and clumsy at range. That gap was the whole plan. The enemy's front line came into view right on schedule, exactly where Rikshasha said it would. My labyrinth wasn't leveling up in time to help, so I told everyone to just hold their assigned ground. When their hero sneered that Naga couldn't win this, I told him to come prove it himself. Turned out the dragons weren't exactly united either. I later heard how Urjag cornered Ajag before the fight, sneering that a dragon who'd once bowed to Nagas was no dragon at all, just a yellow lizard playing dress-up. Ajag didn't back down. Whatever history sat between them, it was about to get settled on my battlefield instead of theirs. Then the lines collided. Their soldiers called my Nagas pathetic and charged in. I split the work fast, archers on their champion, and Rikshasha stepped up to take Ajag himself. I'll make it painless, he said, for old time's sake. Whatever history they'd shared, it was ending right there mid-charge. Rikshasha stood there taking hit after hit from Ajag without flinching. Not recklessness, I realized he was reading him, checking if Ajag even knew his weak point. Off on another line, Draken was fighting his own battle, and for a second I actually worried about him. Then Ajag straightened up, boasting he was a hero of the Flood Dragons and I'd never survive his full power. Rikshasha just watched him, unimpressed. Rikshasha finally answered him, with more dragon blood in his veins than Ajag had ever managed to fake. Ajag froze, stammering that he'd just gone down to the second strongest in our whole labyrinth, calling it impossible. Then Rikshasha let loose everything he'd been holding back, and Ajag's own face took the brunt of it, screaming for him to stop. There was no stopping it. Turned out Ajag wasn't fireproof after all. Rikshasha's flames finished what the beating started, and he went down for good. That was the moment the whole Flood Dragon line cracked. Word spread fast, their hero was dead. We had a dragon fighting for us, and suddenly soldiers who'd been marching in lockstep were screaming to run. On our side, I was already barking new orders, shifting mages, tightening the formation. Before I could enjoy it, one of their beasts came crashing straight into our line and knocked the celebration right out of me. We didn't waste arrows on rank-and-file soldiers. I pulled 2 of my mages off a fence and put them on pure defense instead, and the spellfire that followed lit up the whole battlefield. One of mine came out of that clash gasping that he was still alive, outnumbered but holding. I gave the order to bait the Flood Dragons toward our mid-sized units, straight into the formation we'd built for exactly this. Draken was still anchoring their center, though refusing to budge, and that was the problem. Their numbers meant it was only a matter of time before we got pushed back. So I put Guntis on the left flank and told him not to give up a single step, no matter what came at him. That's when Rikshasha found me with the news that mattered most. The enemy's main force was moving, and leading it personally was Mactus, the Flood Dragon King himself, finally in the war. Rikshasha confirmed it. Mactus was really coming, with roughly 300 troops behind him, soldiers, high-ranked flood dragons, dozens of catapult-wielding beasts. My stomach dropped. This wasn't Ajag or Urjag anymore. This was the Flood Dragon King himself, marching straight on my labyrinth. Their main force surged first. I held my mages back and had them lure the Flood Dragons in instead of trading spells outright. Everyone I pulled toward the abyss was one less at my gates. Then the real trap sprung. My Nagas had disguised a cliff as solid ground with ice, and their charging army dropped straight through it. Dominique gave me the numbers. I'd lost 20 Naga soldiers and a warrior holding that line, but their army had crumbled from 300 down to roughly 260. I pushed Guntis and Draken up to the front to hold the bridge. Then something nagged at me. I hadn't seen a single Flood Dragon champion among their ranks yet. Then Dominique screamed for me. The right wall had been breached, and out of the gap came something the size of a full-grown hell spider, a siege-class Flood Dragon. Behind it marched the champions I'd been missing this whole time, hero-ranked killers from the Flood Dragon Labyrinth, cutting straight for the heart of my defenses. I ordered a fallback to the second line with archers covering us. Guntis alone couldn't drop a hero-class champion yet, and sending Draken out meant one fire breath could level our whole formation. So Rikshesha stepped up again, refusing to sit this one out. I sent him in with Guntis to buy time, then played my last card on the bridge. I released the Blood Leopard. I threw the Blood Leopard into the fight starved and furious. 5 days without food meant it would tear through anything in its path, and that alone could buy us time. The real worry was the siege-class dragon closing in, and I was almost grateful it wanted me, not my Nagas. I pulled Dominique back and sent my mage forward instead. The siege-class dragon wasn't coming for me, it was making straight for the labyrinth's core, and if that fell, everything I'd built died with it. In the chaos, Draken got called back to the front, and one of my gatekeepers moved to cut him off, mocking him for being slow. I didn't care about pride. I only had one order left: stop that thing before it reaches the core. The siege beast mocked Rikshesha as nothing but a tail with legs. He snapped back that he was a dragon too and charged in any way. I asked him to hold on just long enough for me to take down their king. The report came back grim. Losses were mounting fast, and Guntis and Rikshesha, fighting two of the enemy's champions at once, were losing ground. The Blood Leopard was doing better than I'd dared hope. It planned to eat a few before slipping into stealth and running, but instead it started looking down on the Flood Dragons after beating them once already. At this rate, it might end up drawing the king's attention himself. I just hoped it could land a real hit before that happened. Then Mactus himself turned toward us, sneering that it was disgusting a mere claw had reached all the way to him. He didn't so much attack as erase. One blast and half our left flank was gone. Dominique could only whisper his name in horror. The king had finally stepped onto the field. Before I could catch my breath, another horned brute answered Mactus's call and joined the fight. Rikshesha limped back, one arm useless, admitting the enemy hero was tougher than expected. Losing Ajag seemed to have only sharpened him. Draken held back their siege champion, the Blood Leopard held the line, and it was on me to finish their king myself. Guntis swore he could still win his own fight, but the others weren't so sure. All we had to do was hold the line until I finished off Mactus myself. My labyrinth's rank up was ticking down, 24 minutes and 32 seconds and counting, and every second bought mattered. Meanwhile, Rikshesha, half dead in the wreckage, refused Mactus's offer to die with honor, telling him he'd misunderstood something. I am the king of the Naga, I told him flat. Mactus circled me, muttering that I wasn't even flinching, that I was tougher than Draken, that he couldn't find a single crack in me. He'd planned to spare me for being a rare species until he realized a mere worm was sitting on a labyrinth throne. I just laughed. Who's talking big now? I needled him harder. Was it really strength holding him back, or was he still too scared of the human weapon to cut loose? He moved faster than I expected, fast enough that even I struggled to track him. I'd wanted to save the parasite for a real emergency. This was starting to look like one. While I fought, word reached the tunnels below that Flood Dragons carry actual dragon blood, meaning Mactus could unleash a breath attack at any moment. My scouts panicked about it for a beat, got waved off by someone too busy to care, then the joking stopped cold. It didn't matter how many of him there were. What mattered was what came next. I threw everything I had into one opening. Mactus barely blinked. Useless little tricks, he called it, and answered with a strike that split the ground between us. I was still standing. That was the only win I got out of it. The parasite kicked in, and suddenly I could follow his movements. Still couldn't find a real weakness, but I started landing damage under that armor instead. Mactus called it pathetic, insisted a human couldn't possibly have anything left. Then something in him snapped. King Mactus was going serious. His own troops screamed for everyone to run. Even the Flood Dragons were shaking. One of Mactus's own men admitted he was almost grateful. He never thought he'd see his king fight for real again. Someone begged him to run, said his side was clinging to life, but he wouldn't. Watching this, he said, was the greatest honor of his life, because neither I nor my Naga could survive what was coming. Then Mactus changed shape, leaner, faster, every ounce of bulk stripped for pure offense. He'd given up defending entirely, and detection lit up with weak points all over his body, more than I'd ever seen. I wanted to strike right then, but the parasite itself flagged it as a deadly threat, so I held, waiting for the one opening that wouldn't get me killed. Mactus didn't give me a second to breathe. Every strike came faster than the last, and I knew straight up the blade I'd brought wouldn't scratch him. One swing came in too wide, too fast to read. I braced to eat it whole, and felt the parasite inside me lurch awake instead. For one heartbeat, the world nearly stopped. Everything around me crawled while my mind kept racing. Cognition haste, the parasite's gift, speeding up my thoughts while my body lagged behind. I could feel the parasite's own reserves burning to fuel it. Powerful, sure, but dangerous. I needed it to dodge, not to gloat. I needed to end this before the parasite burned itself dry. Mactus, the Flood Dragon King, laughed it off, called me foolish, sure that a faster mind couldn't save a slower body. But with cognition haste running, every opening he gave me sat there just a fraction longer, and I took every single one. Then I caught what he didn't want me to see, his tail whipping in from a blind spot. Cognition haste let me read it in time, and for one moment I actually had him kneeling, Dominique staring in disbelief. I couldn't help needling him. Your position suits you well. Had an epiphany about your identity yet, you lizard. I got you, I thought. Driving the strike straight into a weak point detection had marked for me should have been a clean kill. Instead, his hide held. Some kind of exoskeleton had eaten the blow meant to end him. Dangerous, and apparently nothing special for something his age. Right then the parasite tapped out, cognition haste gone, right when I needed it most. Mactus roared back to life, snarling that he wasn't dying that easily. Then Dominique screamed for me because her king had fallen. Quietly, underneath it all, the system confirmed the labyrinth's rank up had gone through. I heard the words before I felt them. My labyrinth had ranked up, and its first gift was me, fully healed, parasite and all, right back from the dead. My territory doubled, my Nagas surged 30% stronger, and Mactus, the king I'd nearly gutted, came up roaring, humiliated that a lesser thing had made him bleed at all. Mactus swore my healing changed nothing, that he'd finish what he started. I wasn't so sure he believed it. His weapon was broken, and I meant to finish him myself. Then I tore into his line, and one blow was all it took to drop Urjag, his hero commander. His own soldiers panicked. It's the king of Naga. I just called for a fresh sword. Quintus put one in my hand. My parasite wasn't done with me. Cognition haste kicked back in, and I knew this next swing might be the last thing my body could do, so I put everything into it. Mactus took the hit and screamed it was useless, that nothing I threw would matter, but I felt something in him crack that hadn't cracked before. Mactus figured the wound was shallow, planned to bull through and counter the instant I pulled my blade free. He figured wrong. I'd hoarded down gems for exactly this moment, and I poured every last one into that strike. When it landed, even he had to ask where the king of Naga found power like that. All he could do was admit defeat. I didn't stop when Mactus went down. I tore into him until his own soldiers were screaming that their king was gone. One girl watching just muttered how dreamy it looked, which said more about her than me. Then the system pinged. My parasite had just earned a brand new ability. That ability was fortification, and it meant Mactus's whole domain was mine now. Without their king, the summoned flood dragons started breaking down on the spot, turning feral one by one. So I burned every scrap of energy I had left and summoned something new, a Naga champion. With my champion at my back, I gave the order, Nagas, commence your attack. Don't let a single one of them slip away peacefully. No mercy, no clean kills. I wanted the flood dragon's forces to know exactly what happened when they came for my labyrinth. Slaughter them, all of them. Victory, the flood dragon labyrinth fell, and every flood dragon that used to answer to Mactus now answered to me. Word spread fast. Other labyrinth rulers started talking, some mocking Mactus's arrogance, some just uneasy. One of them, the king of gluttony, decided it was time to go scout my territory himself. Back home, the cost came into focus. We'd lost about 50 Naga soldiers, most of them caught in the flood dragon's breath before we could close the distance. Dominique called it a truly heroic trade against an enemy 5 times our size. She wasn't wrong, but 50 was still 50. While a healer patched me up, the real problem was time. The flood dragon labyrinth was sitting there empty, and if I didn't claim it fast, it would just pick a new owner on its own. That's when Guntis brought someone I recognized, the black merchant, offering to help me move fast. The black merchant wanted Mactus's headless corpse for parts, and honestly, fine, take it. But then he pulled out the real reason he'd come, a box holding the seal of a baron. Kill a dragon king, apparently, and the underworld notices. I was being offered a noble title, official recognition, real standing. Naturally, the merchant assumed that made the Flood Dragon Labyrinth worth more to buy off me. He was already doing the math on a bigger payout. I let him finish before I cut him off. Nobody said I was selling. Then I called in my Nagas and watched his face fall. Killing Mactus wasn't enough for me. I wanted nothing left for anyone else to inherit, so I ordered a full plunder of his labyrinth and told my Nagas to strip it to the stone. The black merchant, the goblin trader who'd once dealt with Mactus, begged me to spare the core. I told him to tear that out too, and he actually screamed. The Flood Dragon Labyrinth was gone within days, decades of another king's growth erased on my word. Part of me didn't love it, but the merchant sold off gear my Nagas couldn't use and hurried us along before it was all gone. Then Guntis turned up survivors hiding in the rubble, horned rats. I looked them over and thought, pretty useful. One of my Nagas laid it out for them plain. I was the one who'd killed Mactus and earned a baron's title for it, so bowing to me now was their only way to live. The horned rats dropped flat, but when I actually looked them over, starved, worked half to death, some sick, I wasn't impressed. Skin and bones like that, none of them could lift a tool. Some of them figured I'd just work them to death like Mactus had, or eat them outright. One muttered it might be kinder to just die now. I decided otherwise. Feed them, quarantine them until they healed, then put them to work under real terms, 3 meals, 8 hours of sleep, days off. Die on my watch from anything but old age, and that was on me. To prove I meant it, I held up a fat, wriggling little Naga worker, pampered, healthy, practically glowing, and told the rats that was what well-fed looked like under me. Sleep, meals, protection, time off, that was the deal. It landed. The whole starving mob dropped to their knees calling me their king, swearing to serve until they died. Word spread fast. Every rat that had been hiding came crawling out once they heard there was food instead of a leash. I welcomed all 176 of them into the labyrinth, fed them flood dragon meat by the carcass, and let them rest. 2 days later, back at the Naga labyrinth, a very different problem was waiting for me. Nobody had ever fused 2 labyrinth cores before. Not even the system knew what reactivating one inside the other would do. I said do it anyway. The ranks clashed, the weaker core got throttled down, and it bled out energy worth 1,000 gems before I could stop it. I swore let it go and asked instead how my rats were healing. Fine, I was told. While my Nagas nursed the freed rats back to health, I turned to the real prize. We'd stripped the dead flood dragons of every down gem, freezing them on site before they could rot, and stacked up hundreds of low and mid-grade stones. Then Dominique handed me 1 gem that didn't fit any tier I recognized. Turned out it hadn't come from the fallen Flood Dragon King at all. It was the Blood Leopard's own gem, buried in the wreckage. A find that rare deserved praise, so I gave it. Then I turned to the map. Our territory had swelled clear to the bridge, so I ordered new labyrinth gates, a research lab, a temple, barracks, and farms to fill every inch of it. Dominique pushed for something smaller too, a proper rest room of her own near mine, and private quarters for the soldiers who'd bled for this war. Motivation, she argued, wins fights, morale alone can't. I approved both, and Guntis took charge of getting it built. My labyrinth was about to grow into something bigger than I'd ever built. Bigger, though, wasn't the same as strong enough. What I only learned about later was a slaughter on the surface, a full team of level 85 hunters cut down in minutes. One survivor screamed it wasn't supposed to happen, that the thing was only meant to run. The kill came from something they dismissed as just a mere werebeast. That one word would end up dragging me into more trouble than I expected. My broker had a new pitch, a job on the underworld's 7th floor, chasing rumors of werebeasts, beast-eared, beast-tailed creatures that could actually talk. The explorer sent to capture one never came back. He wasn't asking me to catch anything, he swore, just to bring back proof one existed. Coming from him, that request alone told me how bad this had gotten. He begged until I gave in. Back in my labyrinth, Dominique caught me up. The horned rats had settled into work, running maybe 40% behind my Naga crews, but making up for it in sheer numbers. The lab and forge still needed 3 more days to finish cracking open the blood leopard's heart. As I headed out for the human side of things, Dominique couldn't hide how much it bothered her, me splitting my time between 2 worlds. I told her the truth, I was born human, but the Naga labyrinth was where I actually felt at home now. Every trip topside still paid off, though. The intel I picked up out there was worth more than she realized. 3 days later, the results came in. The blood leopard's heart was a super-grade artifact tied straight to my parasite, proof my own body was going to keep demanding higher and higher grade down gems just to keep growing. Dominique was floored I'd made it back alive collecting it. Dangerous barely covered it. Without what I'd absorbed from the Flood Dragon Labyrinth, I don't think I walk away from that fight. I approved it anyway. My parasite leveled up again, a new trick called camouflage, stay invisible until I actually struck. Nice. But my borrowed swords kept snapping every fight, so before chasing after those werebeast rumors, I decided it was finally time to find a weapon that wouldn't die on me first. Days later, I was back on the underworld's 7th floor, undercover as Jinwoo again. 2 hunters ahead of us stood over fresh corpses, level 8s, gutted by something that wasn't small. Word had already spread. Underworld beasts didn't leave bodies behind, they ate what they killed. Whatever did this hadn't been hunting for food. The bodies kept piling up the deeper we went, untouched gear, nothing stolen, so this wasn't about turf. My gut said one creature, small, cornered, and lashing out to survive, and it was still close. Then it proved me half right and came straight at us. It was faster than I expected. I never even sensed it coming until it was already on top of me. Damn it, but the pieces clicked fast. This had to be the werebeast Beck warned me about, the one that wiped out that expedition, which meant I just found exactly what my client was paying for. Up close, it barely knew how to attack. Fighting it felt like sparring a shrunk-down blood leopard, maybe on par with my own Guntus. I told it I had no interest in killing it if it backed off. Wrong move on its part. It screamed something about not passing up a good kill and came in swinging anyway. Didn't take long after that. We had it. With the werebeast bagged, we turned back before anything worse showed up. That's when the real trouble started. The team grilled a lone survivor from the wiped-out expedition, needling him about walking out alive with a pouch of downed gems while everyone else died. And somewhere close, something was already sizing me up, reading 3 seconds of my next moves before I made them. A ghostly blade came at me on a countdown clock, 3 strikes queued up before I could react, so I made sure none landed. "It's over," I said when the last one missed. The team lead wasn't happy I hadn't warned them first, but what stuck with him was my reaction time, too fast for a low-floor veteran. He started looking at me like he suspected what I really was. Turned out I wasn't the only one hiding something. The reaction he clocked belonged to human hunters stalking our own camp, the same shark-toothed bandits the underworld warns you about. My eyes lit up purple the instant I placed them. 0.2 seconds, that's all the warning I needed. Then, before we'd even caught our breath, something worse tore into camp, and this time, running wasn't going to be enough. He called me trash, dared me to keep fighting, so I told him plainly I wasn't letting a single one of them walk away. The second I moved, he couldn't tell what was even real anymore. The gap between us was that wide. Someone screamed my true level out loud, 12, and just like that, the whole ambush was over. Still catching my breath, I turned to find one more problem waiting, the werebeast I'd been sent to capture. I gave her one last chance to stand down, and instead of the monster I braced for, she just blinked up at me with the goofiest, most harmless look on her face. While I was gone, my Nagas fought their own battle back home. More mouths meant our rabbits and bears couldn't keep up. They traced the raiders hitting our borders to the old Flood Dragon Labyrinth, and with that handled, all that was left was finishing the walls. Then someone spotted me coming and shouted the word that got everyone moving: Master. Back home, I introduced my newest addition, the werebeast I'd pulled off the 7th floor, the one blamed for wiping out that hunter squad. Turned out she was hero rank, rarer than I expected for something born straight out of the abyss. I told my Nagas to look after her. 2 weeks later, she'd settled right in, living among monsters like she'd never known anything else. The Flood Dragon Corps had unlocked new blood for my temple, long-range scouts and sorcerers, so we'd stop getting caught flat-footed. I put everyone to work. Rikshesha went hunting for Flood Dragon supplies, Guntus took over training and defense, and Draken built a network of eyes around the labyrinth. A month later, we ran like clockwork, stronger, better equipped, barely needing me at all. My scouts caught it first, a small, disciplined force massing half a day out from my labyrinth, moving straight for my gate. Not a monster horde, a real army with formation and command. I could have sent my generals to handle it. Instead, I decided to lead the defense myself. What showed up at my gate wasn't an attack. It was 2 hulking goblins, Emlock and Block, announcing themselves as envoys of Malaxis, the king of hammer and anvil, demanding an audience with the Naga Labyrinth's king like I owed them one, war hammers raised like they'd swing first and talk later. Then they dropped to their knees. Turns out I wasn't looking at an invasion, I was the guest of honor. They'd come to pay respects to the first ruler in the region to earn the noble title. Terrified, they'd already insulted me just by marching in armed, and they'd brought a gift. The gift was a chest of down gems worth 500 labyrinth energy points, real wealth in my world. Mlock admitted it straight. Every other nearby labyrinth had skipped this courtesy. I was the first ruler they'd actually bothered to visit. All they wanted back was to stay on my good side, and they threw in something worth more than gold, the locations of every labyrinth on the 9th floor. Here's what I hadn't known: 3 labyrinths, Gluttony, the Dead, and Dreams, had held a careful triangle of power for ages, none strong enough to strike another without leaving their own throne open. Then I walked in and wiped out the Flood Dragon Labyrinth, and that balance broke overnight. Suddenly, every ruler smaller than me had a very good reason to make friends fast. Turned out the ruler of the Labyrinth of Gluttony wasn't a threat at all. He'd let his own body balloon past the point of moving, feeding on whatever wandered near his throne and calling it strength. Good to know. I thanked Mlock and Block for the intel, sent my regards back to Malaxis, turned down anything deeper, and had Quintus walk them out. My scout Rikshasha backed up every word of it. 3 labyrinths left on the 9th floor. The Labyrinth of Dreams, ruled by a witch queen and her fairies. The Labyrinth of the Dead, ruled by the King of Swamps over fish and rot. And the Labyrinth of Wanderers, where Birarm ruled centaurs who apparently couldn't manage basic manners when guests came calling. Back home with Dominique, my parasite flared. It had picked up something that didn't belong. Not a person, a creature stuck to my own ceiling, spying, calling itself a lump of glutton. Rudest visitor I'd had yet, and it hadn't even come to say hello. So I had to ask myself, did somebody just declare war on me without saying it out loud? Dominique warned me those glutton spies fed everything they saw straight back to their king, meaning I'd basically already declared war without meaning to, so I decided to mean it. I hadn't said it in front of the goblins, but we had one edge on the gluttons. Ice was their weakness. I grabbed the spy and made it simple. We march in 1 week, and I freeze their whole labyrinth solid. The spy panicked at how serious I sounded. I told it plainly, if he wanted to apologize, he'd better show up himself before the week was out. A week later, Dominique came running. The king of gluttony himself had walked straight into my labyrinth, uninvited. I figured he'd come to die rather than beg forgiveness, the king of gluttony, pouring in as a churning mass of eyes and slime. It looked like he meant to rush straight for my owner's room and shatter the labyrinth's core, but I'd already planned for that. My magicians were waiting, and by the time he noticed, he was already surrounded. Something felt off. He wasn't shrinking back from the ice. If anything, he looked eager, twitching like he was about to lunge. For a second, I doubted Dominique's read on him, then shook it off. I drew my blade, told my mages to reinforce it, and felt my parasite's hardening kick in. Millions of you are not, I told him. You're still just slimes. I gave the order, everyone attack. Don't give him the chance to try anything. The ice came down hard, and that whole churning mass collapsed to almost nothing. All that was left of the king of gluttony managed one small, broken phrase: I am sorry. What I only pieced together afterward was that other really had come to apologize, introducing himself, polite as anything, thinking he was just being let in for a meeting. By the time my magicians sealed the corridor around him, all he could do was panic, insisting again and again that he never wanted to fight. I asked why he'd stayed silent through the whole thing. Turned out he'd been talking the entire time. He just had no vocal cords for me to hear. So that was what actually happened. Once he pulled himself into a small, shaky form, he admitted he'd been alone so long he'd half forgotten how to hold a conversation, then introduced himself properly as Other, King of Gluttony. Congratulations poured in on my new Baron title, and Other finally worked up the nerve to visit and thank me for accepting his apology, bringing a peace offering of down gems. But he let something slip. Keeping his slime body together burned tons of gems a minute, and without the labyrinth of gluttony feeding him, he had about a month before he ran out and died, calm as always. I did the math out loud, freeze him all at once and it'd be over. He agreed, but explained why that was never possible. His mass was too vast, and one crack of the floor was enough to disperse the ice before it locked him down. Then, once the misunderstanding was cleared up, I tried to leave, only to learn he'd never forgiven me. He'd wanted me to show up. His price for forgiveness turned out to be steeper than an apology. He wanted to become my knight. Bound to me by contract, he said, immune to ice and finally free of a decade shut inside his own labyrinth. I could see what this was, a hikikomori looking for an excuse to leave the house. So I performed the ritual. I, Baron Kim Jinwoo, named Other my first knight. He signed immediately. The terms were lopsided in my favor, other bound to protect me in my labyrinth with his life, obey every order, and hand over his earnings as tribute while I owed him nothing. Meanwhile, far above my floor, the black merchants running the underworld's black market were planning their annual auction, noting that almost every floor owner below the ninth was long gone, replaced by whoever could survive. Word spread that the fourth floor's new owner wasn't some monster lord, it was a human. The council buzzed with disbelief, wondering how long I'd last. Then someone produced proof it was worse than that. A goblin held up a VIP ticket meant only for nobles, and the room realized the same human clinging to life on the 8th floor had somehow gotten himself named a baron too. So the black merchants sent an envoy straight to me, explaining their invite-only auction, the hundreds of collectors who once packed the peak years, and the protection racket that kept the group's labyrinth safe. Attack one of theirs and they'd hunt you down themselves. Then mid-pitch the goblin froze, spotting the shape looming behind me and stammering out a name he clearly hadn't expected to see. Other, King of Gluttony. That's my night now, I told him and watched the news detonate. A baron with a labyrinth owner subordinate on his own floor rank wasn't supposed to exist. It meant an alliance nobody else on the 9th floor could ignore. The one comfort for Other's rivals was technical. My contract bound Other himself, not the labyrinth of gluttony he still ruled. Rattled, the envoy pivoted into business, offering me a tour. Back on script, he laid out the offer properly. A private VIP box overlooking the auction floor, food and service built for nobles, all to keep me entertained and spending. I asked who else showed up, apparently even Valicious, some ghost obsessed with biological experiments, wagered his own life core there every year. Curiosity won. I told him I'd come and that I was bringing company. A week after freezing Other, King of Gluttony, I dragged my crew out to the edge of his labyrinth to use it as cover for where we were really headed. Guntus locked down our escort. Dominique stayed home to keep my own labyrinth running smooth. Then it was time to move. The black merchants were waiting. The second we walked in, the floor was already a powder keg, merchants screaming threats over old grudges, someone daring another to just strike them already. I asked if it was always like this. Turns out most of their customers were already at war with each other. They hadn't picked us for the drama on purpose. Then somebody spotted me. Baron, sir, look, that's him. Across the aisle sat a figure everyone gave a wide, empty berth, hooded, silent, reeking of rot, rumored to own the labyrinth of the dead. Fighting was banned on the floor, so the tension just simmered until the lights dropped and the host stepped out to open the black merchant's annual auction, promising a finale worth staying for. Then the first product came out screaming, chained and thrashing in its cage. The host built it up like a miracle, something not seen in 10 years, something that bit the hand that fed it, something Geyser barely had left. A Geyserian, she called it. I didn't like where this was going. Turned out a Geyserian wasn't a monster at all, it was a human. Nearly wiped out under the treaty with the surface, this one had been secretly raised by a noble who'd spared it as a baby. Now it was being sold to deep-floor buyers who'd never seen a human up close, as a pet, a study subject, or worse, a meal. The bid opened low. The thing was defective, unable to even scream. As the numbers climbed, I finally saw it clearly and my stomach dropped. That wasn't a Geyserian, that was a dungeon baby, same as me. My people pulled me back before I could open my mouth. Too many labyrinth owners watching, no room to fight our way through this. Rikshasha didn't let me off easy. Hadn't I sworn revenge on the Necromancer King for experimenting on my kind? Would I really sit still if that cage held one of hers instead of a human? I couldn't say I would. She said she understood the fire, but this wasn't a fight I could win with a sword. It was an auction, so get to the point. The point was simple, just buy him back. Bidding exploded past 1,000, and to my shock, the Necromancer King himself threw his hand in, refusing to fold at 1,200. Other guests muttered he'd lost his mind touching a human product. I didn't care. I pushed it to 1,500 and dared him to match it. 1,600 gems closed it. The dungeon baby went to the noble, sir, no questions asked. Behind me, the Necromancer King seethed, stuck eating the loss and the private room's damage fees. I pushed for her right away. No luck, she wouldn't ship for a week, but I could visit her today. That was enough for me. The auction rolled on great war relics, enchanted down gems, oddities nobody understood. Then came the reason the whole room had stayed, a vampire dragged onto the stage. They barely existed in Geyser anymore, bloodline worn thin or not. Bidding opened at 3,000 gems and the room came alive. The number climbed 3,500, 3,800 until the auctioneer stepped in to calm things down. There was a catch. The vampire had to recognize her buyer as master or the deal voided on the spot. Whoever won her would be marked as ruling one of Jaiser's deepest labyrinths, not me. I already had enough additions to my crew. She sold for 23,000 gems, obscene money. Then she looked her new owner dead in the eye and laughed. "You must be joking," she said. "I'm the ruler of the 6th floor." He never got the chance to argue. By the time the dust settled, all that was left of him was a flawless down gem rolling across the floor. Hours later, Other and I were finally led back to see what my gems had bought. The merchant warned me not to touch her yet. Paperwork still had to clear before she was legally mine. I stepped in anyway. She just sat there, purple hair, eyes fixed on nothing, like nobody was home. I asked her name, nothing. Her eyes wouldn't even find me. I told her I wouldn't hurt her, wouldn't mark her like whoever had before me. Turns out she'd lost the ability to speak. The labyrinth does that to people. So I said the only thing that might reach her, "I'm your new master now," and she dropped to the floor. Disgusting, whoever did this to her. I kept asking anyway, which labyrinth, which master, and got silence every time. I'd planned to hand her to the Naga Empire and move on, but she was worse off than expected. Abandon her now and she just gets used again. So I decided to keep her myself, told her to rest, and turned on the merchants, asking if this was really the best care they had to offer. I told the staff to treat her properly, a room, food, care for every injury, same as they'd give me. One of them balked, called it wasted comfort on a Jaiserian bred only to work, so I told them straight, the man giving that order was a Jaiserian too. The room went dead silent, then came the apology, and a promise to look after her properly from then on. 11 days in that gilded holding room, fed well, bored out of my skull with nothing to do but listen. So I did to the elf mercenary's story. Her guild survived the fall of her people, only to be baited into a trap by something that hunted them for sport. She alone walked away. I'd seen enough to know that wasn't rare. I promised her my help with her revenge. She asked if I was really willing to help her since she dragged me into that maze herself. I told her it didn't matter, the danger had already found me either way. Then I turned to Glutton, my little green caretaker, and asked how the girl was doing. Still the same, staring at nothing from the corner of the room, barely eating unless someone forced the spoon into her hand. She wouldn't eat unless someone told her to, like a doll that only moved on command. It would take time to undo what had been done to her. Then the black merchant's voice cut through the halls. The final auction was starting. Nothing that day was worth my gems' overpriced luxury, with my real budget locked away for the war brewing back home. I just wanted it over. Then the grand finale. Everyone already knew what was coming out next, the vampire, the one who'd refused to speak for a week straight. Someone cracked a joke that she was only there for her own amusement, that no one could actually win her. Then she cut through the noise herself. This time, she said, the bidders wouldn't choose her. She'd choose her master, and that choice alone would decide what she was worth. Didn't matter how high or low the offer, she said. She'd already made her choice back on the first day. She drifted straight toward one room, the one where a masked noble had gone on a bloody rampage that very night. The scent still hanging in the air was sweet enough that she couldn't hold herself back any longer. She knelt and called him master. The vampire had chosen a masked aristocrat, not the highest bidder. The crowd lost it, some muttering the whole thing had been rigged from the start, but the rule held, her price would be whatever he named. So when the auctioneer finally asked how much she was worth, his answer landed like an insult, one down gem. The room exploded. A peerless vampire, sold for the lowest ranked down gem there was. I wasn't surprised. Watching beside Glutton, I'd already guessed the aristocrat cared more about proving his own indifference than what he actually owned. By the time the room settled, they were already mocking her with a new nickname, the one-gem vampire. The goblin auctioneer wrapped up the night's auction, thanked the crowd, then grinned my way. "Congratulations, you've bought a precious vampire at an unbelievable price." Every eye in the room turned to me. I'd bid under a mask, playing the aristocrat, and now Young-Ho, the dungeon baby underneath the mask, had to own the win. So, why me? The broker grilled me over the coincidence. Did I orchestrate the whole auction? I brushed him off. When he warned her old owner might come after me, I called the bluff and told him to take her back. She panicked, swearing her blood alone would raise my status. I didn't need it. I was human, and I still put people first. She introduced herself properly this time, Angela. Her previous owner, she said, was Count Anatolius, a steel giant ruling the 11th floor, and he genuinely doted on her. The problem was simpler than any conspiracy. A vampire needs her master's blood to draw power, and Anatolius's blood was pure steel. He couldn't feed her, so he'd been forced to give her away. She'd been starving for months, she said, and my smile alone had looked delicious. I told her flat out I wasn't her owner and didn't need a vampire hanging off me. She begged anyway, whittling her ask down from a liter to a drop, until the broker warned that turning her away outright might genuinely anger Anatolius. Bothered more than convinced, I gave in. Fine, she could have my blood. The second I said yes, she lunged. Fangs in my neck, her cape snapping like a living thing around us both. Thank you for the meal. She screamed mid-bite, then she froze. Her eyes went wide, confused, like she'd just tasted something she wasn't expecting at all. Time moved on. Dominique eyed my new house guests inside. The vampire was shameless, but a genuine hero-class servant, rarer than almost anything born in the labyrinth. I gave Angela her own room, kept the quiet Jaisirian girl, Yunha, close, and ordered my staff to feed her, bathe her, and bring in healers. Naga's king, it turned out, now ran a full household. Angela settled into the estate like she'd always belonged there, and I finally got the rest of her story. Count Anatolius hadn't given her up out of kindness. He was stuck in a ninth-floor deadlock, desperate for power, and trading her away was the price of getting stronger. She said she'd simply followed my scent, no grand mystery to it. Settling 2 new house guests, a vampire and a rescued dungeon baby, put me on thin ice with Dominique, who hated that I'd fed Angela my own blood. I'd already proven myself once, the rest could wait until morning. The next day I came back from a break to chaos. My broker had news that shook the whole underworld. Somewhere out there, a labyrinth had accepted a new dungeon baby as its master a month back, tearing open a portal straight to the surface. The association was still reeling. Turns out Jaiser's monsters weren't the only ones running black markets. Dungeon babies were getting sold for a fortune at these auctions, same as I'd nearly been. Then came the gut punch. That labyrinth's new owner was already dead, murdered by his own teammate for the money his title was worth. My broker smelled opportunity and offered me everything free of charge, practically begging me to go claim a labyrinth of my own, with no idea I already had one. Then he mentioned an empty one on the 7th floor, rumored to have the highest potential in Jaiser, already being scouted by Song Jung-hul's crew. He called me reasonable for someone with a rotten personality. I'll take it. When he asked when I planned to move, I told him, right now. Get me weapons, I said, unbreakable ones this time. No more waiting around. Angela was waiting when I got back to the labyrinth. The 7th floor wasn't empty after all. Whoever got there first wasn't friendly. I figured I'd let my tired defenders rest and travel light, until Dominique piped up insisting she could sense every living thing for miles, and Angela could track a scent just as well. Then Dominique popped straight out of my shadow. Turned out she'd snuck along the whole time. Since she wasn't going to slow us down, I let her tag along, Angela too, and brought Yunha for good measure. That's when she showed me the ability nobody had noticed. She could draw out a living map of the labyrinth itself. Yunha's gift turned out to be exactly what I needed. Her mental map of a labyrinth stayed live, updating in real time, when every other labyrinth I had ever heard of only handed you decades-old scraps near the entrance. That made the decision easy. She was coming with us. Dominique bristled at the risk, but I promised I'd keep her safe myself. 2 days into the trek across Jaiser, and we hadn't crossed a single living thing. Turns out nobody's dumb enough to get near a labyrinth guarded by a vampire and a naga that dangerous. Other grumbled about beasts mistaking him for muscle. I grumbled 2/3 expedition in a row, no break in sight. Dominique promised real rest once this one was done. We reached the entrance to the 8th floor, and for the first time since I got my labyrinth, I felt real nerves. I'd never left my own floor before. Turns out most labyrinth owners never do. The farther you get from where you were born, the weaker you get. It's the one handicap keeping the deep floors from steamrolling everything above them. Angela needled other the whole climb. The higher we went, the more useless his kind got, while her own power barely dipped as long as she stayed near me. The joke died fast. Yunha caught it first through our shadow link. We were surrounded, 50 to 70 of them, closing in from every side. I told other to get her somewhere safe and hide. They came in fast, and I answered by disappearing. My camouflage skill kicked in, and fused with a sliver of Angela's vampire blood, it upgraded into something better: true invisibility. No scent, no heartbeat, nothing to track. The horde tore through the space where we'd been standing a second earlier, howling that something from the 9th floor had just been right there. Their leader called himself King Nose and swore his snout never missed a scent, right up until it did. While his pack snapped at empty air, I was already talking to Yunha through the shadows, using her live map to read the whole formation. The 2 out front weren't just lucky, they were the commanders. The plan was simple: take the head, and the rest falls apart. One of the commanders slammed the ground and called it Mother Earth, burying me under a wall of rock without warning. For one long second, even my own people thought I was dead. I wasn't. I'd let it hit me on purpose, trusting the toughness my fortification had built since Mactus. Young-ho could take a mountain to the face and still get up. I let them see exactly who'd just broken their ambush. Master of the Nagas, I told them, and to the rest of Jaiser, Baron Kim Jinwoo. Bow down, I said, because there wouldn't be a second chance. We picked the field clean afterward, and even King Nose, the one who swore his nose never failed him, just shrugged and admitted he'd only ever been smelling for prey. Word spread fast. The Baron was coming through, and this floor's crowd scattered to clear me a path. Angela, my vampire, drew every nervous stare in the place. Turns out a pack of her kind had torn through here decades back, and nobody who survived had ever forgot the taste they left behind. Crowded as it was, at least fear kept the road open. Deeper in, the real ruler of that stretch stepped up, a hulking boar chief, furious at his own scouts for siding with an outsider instead of dragging me in as prey. He sized me up, an aristocrat traveling with a vampire, never seen his floor before. I kept it simple, passing through, urgent business on the 8th floor, and his ground just happened to be on the way to the 7th. He wasn't keen on letting an armed aristocrat wander his war zone, but he had an angle. He'd personally draw the fighting away and clear me a path, if I owed him a favor once my business on the 7th floor was done. Deal struck. He sent his own troops home to fortify the labyrinth, brushing off talk of a rival called Scarlet Lion Marcus like it was nothing. They called him the charging Akhenaten, and he meant it, plunging into the war zone as bait, the ground shaking from half a day away. It worked. Every beast turned to chase him instead. 3 days later we reached Jaiser's 7th floor entrance, only for Other to admit his gluttony reserves were draining faster than he could refill them, and then Yunha's eyes flared. I tossed Yunha a blade and told her to show me what she had. The way she moved, sharp, controlled, wasn't beginner's luck. Had she fought before, or was she just naturally gifted? Even Other couldn't resist grumbling the whole time about being unfairly branded the glutton. Angela met me on a field littered with corpses, over 200, all told, basically a war. She said the smell of blood was so thick, now she couldn't track down what was left of the enemy. There was a way to finish the job fast, she said, but it would cost me more of my blood. I usually let her draw from me sparingly. This time I agreed to 2 full cups. She grinned like something starved finally let off its leash, called it the Festival of Blood, and tore into whatever remained. When the dust settled minutes later, there wasn't a single sign of life left on that field. Then Yunha went quiet. 1 second she was reading the ground, the next the earth just swallowed her whole. I screamed her name and clawed into the dirt with my own hands while Other dug beside me, but there was no trace of her, no scent, no residue of magic. None of it made sense. Even Glutton, whose nose never failed, found nothing, like the floor itself had swallowed her. Then it clicked. She'd received a labyrinth call of her own. My map lit up with ground none of us had ever charted, all thanks to her map-making gift. She was days away on foot, but I had her marked now. I'd found her. We went invisible and moved fast, Yuna helpless without food if we didn't reach her soon. Then Angela caught something strange, not beasts this time, but crowds of humans, hundreds of them, all converging on the same spot. Something empty and unclaimed down here had every scavenger on the 7th floor on the move at once. We found it, an empty labyrinth, ownership still up for grabs, association hunters and freelancers already brawling over the entrance. I even spotted a face I recognized, one Beck had warned me about, tempting, but I marked it for later. Nothing mattered more right now than getting to Yunha. Angela caught Yunha's trace, and it pulled us through a crumbling ruin strung with red curtains, past a pirate mask nailed up like a warning sign. Then in a blink I was alone. I called for Angela, for Other's silence answered back. I reached for my parasite, for camouflage, hardening, even a simple map of where I stood, and every skill I had just wasn't there. Then a voice called me insane, and I was standing among my old squad, the same team I once posed among as the fake, weaker hunter they called Jinwoo. They laughed, teased me for dozing off again, called me their storyteller, their chatterbox. It felt so real, but somewhere underneath the warmth, something in me knew I wasn't fully awake. One by one I named my dead, a baker, a sergeant, a technician, a chef, the soldier who carried a friend from the start, all gone the day our war ended. Last of all, reporter Kim Jinwoo, who bled out in my own arms and taught me what death really was. I, Young-ho, understood. This labyrinth had trapped me inside my happiest memory, because it was my most tragic one. A masked hypnotist's spell nearly buried all of us in dreams before Glutton broke it, and when hypnosis failed, this hidden labyrinth sent masked soldiers after us instead, weak but built to break minds, not bodies. Shaken as I was, I refused to raise the place. One job left, find Yunha. We traced her signal to solid rock with no entrance in sight. Others' fist tore straight through solid rock. Of course, the place had sealed its own entrance to hide the owner room. That was the whole point of a defense mechanism. Inside, I found Yunha sitting there untouched, like she hadn't moved an inch since she disappeared. I knew exactly what this felt like, so I told her straight, accept the labyrinth, make it yours. The labyrinth peeled back into a carnival, banners, balloons, a grinning ringmaster poster, dressed up like a festival that never ended. Even other called it flamboyant, and he wasn't wrong. Then the window I knew too well opened in front of Yunha. Press yes to proceed with the synchronization. I'd stood in that exact spot once, now it was her turn. The system locked it in. Yunha, registered as owner of the labyrinth of madness, delight, and festivals filled with dream-like joy. I watched it restructure itself around her like it was learning her taste. A gate opened, the sync finished, and repairs would take a full day. I said her name once more, just to make sure she was still with me. So I did what any self-respecting king would do. I tried teaching Yunha to talk. Portal, I said. What came back was somewhere between a wail and a word, and I couldn't stop laughing. Then a real portal cracked open under us without warning. We dropped through into somewhere I definitely hadn't planned for, and before I could curse, a voice called out, "Master." Turned out we'd landed right back in Yunha's new labyrinth, her portal firing the wrong way. It reminded me of the Naga labyrinth in its smallest, earliest days. I left Dominique, Nova, and Draken behind to guard the place, sent Other and Yunha home, and kept Angela with me. I had somewhere else to be, and she wasn't letting me leave without a taste of my blood first. What actually pulled me away was gossip, word going around that humans could become labyrinth owners too, and that an empty labyrinth sat open on the 7th floor for anyone bold enough to claim it. I wanted to see it before the Exploration Association got any ideas of their own. I told Angela to slip into my shadow. We'd go in invisible. Naturally, the association had already beat me there. Song Jonghul, the red-haired rival who'd been sniffing around my business before, felt something slip past him and went dead quiet. He wasn't the type to spook easy. His men swept the owner room grumbling about buttons and magic devices, completely clueless what they were actually standing next to. Angela and I pushed past them to the heart of the place. No traps, no maze, just a straight shot to an altar with a labyrinth emblem built to greet a master who never came. The core hadn't died, it was still waiting. I triggered my parasite's detection, and there it was, something dormant, tucked away, refusing to wake until it found the right owner. "Master," Angela asked as I reached for the dead altar. "Wait," I told her. The imprint failed, the core rejected me outright. Left alone, it'd wake again someday and hand this floor to some other faction, human or otherwise, not today. I pushed past its dying resistance and forced the synchronization myself, feeling the whole labyrinth fight back with everything it had left. Topside, the Exploration Association felt it before they understood it. Jonghul barked for his people to fall in, certain something had gone wrong with the floor itself. He wasn't wrong. Down in the dark, I was staring down a labyrinth's ego and telling it plainly, give up. The end was the same whether it died a beast or lived on as mine. Come to me. It worked. I ripped the core loose and claimed it, forcibly extracted, not given, but breaking something that size doesn't stay quiet. Something came boiling up out of the dark right where Jonghul's team stood, and their calm shattered into "What is that?" and "Is anyone hurt?" None of them had any idea what had just crawled out of the floor beneath them. Whatever I'd torn loose came for them like a nightmare given teeth, people screaming for their mothers, hands grabbing at nothing, the whole team scattered and terrified. Their own captain had to shout them back into formation, get up, get into position, or die. It took real effort just to get anyone pointing in the right direction. Then just as fast it ran. The association stood there stunned, arguing over whether to chase something too strong to kill, deciding instead to count their wounded and pull out before they lost the floor entirely. What they never learned was the cost on my end. I'd built that whole monster out of nothing, and it left the parasite drained and me coughing blood on the ground. Angela called it a deceptive bit of fun, scaring humans into thinking a monster owned that floor. It worked. We walked away with the core and no reason to stick around, but I wasn't heading home yet. I still had a promise to keep on the 8th floor with the big tusk boar tribe. I got the usual warm welcome, jokes about muscles I definitely didn't have, until something stopped me cold. That something was Akhenaten, the boar chief, barely alive. He'd crossed blades with Scarlet Lion Marcus of the 7th floor, and both of them had paid for it. Worse, Marcus's people had abandoned their own floor for the 8th because the 7th had gone chaotic, overrun, his men said, by a swarm of humans. meaning the Exploration Association's mess had rippled straight into someone else's war. I sat with him and told him I'd come to finish what I owed. His condition was on me, so I'd do whatever it took to make it right. He laughed at that, called me a generous aristocrat, while I quietly worried my parasite had nothing left to give if he demanded Marcus's head. But what Akinarusi wanted wasn't revenge, he just wanted out of this place. Akinarusi didn't ask for revenge, he asked to fight beside me as my knight if I'd take him down to the 9th floor. Leaving his own territory looked exactly like what it was, running from Scarlet Lion Marcus. He admitted it outright. We'd barely spoken before that day, but I already knew enough to say yes. He told me everything, how survival forced him to change, hardening into something enemies mistook for a monster. How he stood first against every threat that came for the 8th floor, war after war, until he thought he'd finally earned some peace. Then Scarlet Lion's men came anyway. He was exhausted and letting me see it because he trusted me. So I took him in as my 3rd knight, better than any veteran who struts around on rank alone. Tough times were coming, war clouds gathering on the 3rd floor, courtesy of the Necromancer King who'd slaughter anything for chimera parts. I promised backup once the 9th floor settled. Akinarusi just sat there, quietly relieved he didn't have to fight alone anymore. My broker had news. The labyrinth I'd terrorized to scare off Song Jong-hul's team was now rumored to hide a monster from the abyss, strong enough that the association gave up on it. Nobody suspected it was me. Then he slid over a card. A government agency wanted me for some big project tied to Junyoung's old team. I turned it down. Jaiser was already chaotic enough. The system flashed a status update. Yunha, officially my 2nd knight now, and the portal between our labyrinths finally open. I stepped through into chaos. One of her horned workers was screaming into an empty room, panicking because nobody had answered his calls. The place looked banged up and nobody had a good explanation why. Turned out it wasn't an invasion, just my own workers, same as always, except now there was a real mess to fix. I ordered them to map the grounds and build proper storage. Then I turned to Yunha. Since she couldn't run her own labyrinth alone, I invoked Regency, an aristocrat's right to command a knight's domain as mine. She didn't say a word, she didn't have to. With Regency locked in, I ran Yunha's labyrinth like my own, burned down gems, pushed every rank up, put the idle workers to use. Then it hit me. Every labyrinth breeds units nobody else can copy, so I summoned one of each kind from her carnival grounds just to see what she actually had. None of those units could hold a formation. They were glass cannons, every one of them. But there was a skill called Sweet Dreams, some kind of defense trick that could cancel an enemy's turn cold. Against a lone target it was nasty, against a horde it was useless. My own Naga labyrinth, by comparison, had no such trick, just solid, balanced, nothing special troops. Simple was still better. If I'd started with the festival labyrinth instead of the Naga one, Mactus would have buried me. I told Yunha to try Sweet Dreams on that reptile, but there wasn't enough energy stored to cast it. So I grabbed Draken, told him to relax for his own good, and drained what I needed out of him in under a second. I tested it myself. The clown's illusion made an enemy believe he was some dragon's successor mid-fight, wide open for one clean hit. The minstrel could pose as an enemy of Yunha's own labyrinth and turn her skill back on him. Piece by piece I was learning how to fight with the labyrinth of festivals and put the rabbit in charge of the loitering workers. 2 weeks of non-stop upgrading later, the Naga labyrinth hit rank 8, the labyrinth of festivals hit rank 9, stronger troops, more of them, safer walls. Dominique and others showed up expecting me, still recovering. I wasn't. I told them to declare war on the Queen of Dreams that very night, no warning, straight ambush. They both just stared at me. Before that war even started, a bigger problem barged in. Valicious was already screaming to throw down with the Necromancer King, and I wanted him to wait until I explained the army of the dead. I never got the chance. Rikshesha came sprinting in, gasping, saying something had crossed into my territory. For a second I thought the Necromancer King had beaten us to it. It wasn't him. Rikshesha could barely spit the name out, and when it landed I understood why. Count Anatolius, the steel-blooded giant who once owned Angela, was closing in on my labyrinth. Just the name had my own men shaking. Why he was coming, what he wanted from me, I had no answer yet, only the sinking feeling I was about to find out the hard way. My scouts came back shaking, mumbling about an 11th floor aristocrat spotted wandering the 9th floor. He'd caught my whole recon team without a real fight and let every one of them live. That wasn't mercy. It was a message. He was coming for me, and he wanted me to know it. Angela went pale just talking about him, said the Necromancer King, even the Flood Dragon King, weren't in his league and begged me to run. I couldn't hide behind my own walls forever, so I told her we'd meet him head-on and gave her one order. Whatever he did, we would not show him hostility. Hours later at the northern gate, I had every unit I owned lined up and the portal sealed just in case. Dominique refused to stay behind, said she'd die anyway if the labyrinth fell, and that seeing him now mattered more than staying safe later. I let her come. My own parasite screamed at me to run before I even saw his face. When I did, I understood why Count Anatolius stood taller than our castle walls, dwarfing anything I'd fought before. I refused to look like a coward, until his voice hit us like a fist pressing us into the ground. "Kneel," he said, and my knees started bending on their own. Gravity itself seemed to multiply, my whole body crushed by a will on a completely different level than anything I'd faced. Everyone around me hit the ground. I don't know how long I held it, only that when I looked up, the Count had let the pressure go himself and muttered one word, "Not bad." He let me stand before him, called me a step above some pitiful baron from the 10th floor, and said he was satisfied. Then came the offer, teacher, investor, guide, so long as I obeyed every command. I asked what happened if I refused. He didn't bother answering me. He answered by ordering Valicious to rise and seize the 9th floor instead. He left the way he came, saying he'd wait on the 11th floor, and I told him to do whatever he wanted, swallowing the humiliation for later. I'd barely caught my breath before the black merchant strolled up grinning, saying he'd heard I ran the auction now and had already secured me a spot in his group. The black merchant came back with what he called a peace offering dirt on Valicious, the ghost circling my labyrinth. Then I found out where his information came from: my corpses sold twice over. He'd handed the same intel straight to the Necromancer King. "Balance things out," he said. I called it a betrayal I wasn't going to forget. Turned out the leak cut both ways. Whatever he'd sold on me, he'd handed the Necromancer King's secret weapon right back. Small comfort. I shut the chat down and demanded the real briefing. A week later I stood before my full war council. Soldiers, warriors, archers, healers, mages, scouts, and 100 fresh troops built from flood dragon flesh. We were going to war. An army of 1,000, all told, smaller than whatever the Necromancer King had waiting. 5,000 low-ranking corpses by our best guess. Dominique walked me through what we were facing. Mindless fodder that just kept coming, elite undead carrying real labyrinth power, and at the top, chimeras, his strongest kills, stitched back together and weaponized. Recon told us the rest, or tried to. Every scouting run near the labyrinth of the dead had failed, because the dead never slept, and neither did whatever watched over that ground. We mapped 2 enemy divisions, half a day apart. The Flood Dragon King's remains in one, Valicious himself in the other. One wrong step and we'd walk into a trap built for a bigger war. We prepared anyway. We split into 3 strike groups, other set to hold the center. Then, mid-briefing, I realized one of the kids sitting in on the plan wasn't a child at all. It was a spy device, listening to every word. Assuming the enemy already knew our plan, we adjusted on the spot. Other holds alone, while Rikshasha and I peel off to gut the Necromancer King's rear guard ourselves. Dominique told me to be careful. I told her the same. Whoever broke through first, we'd all end up meeting Valicious face to face, and if it went wrong, we'd fall back to the Naga labyrinth. No objections. I handed command to Bantu, raised my hand, and gave the only order that mattered: every soldier to the battlefield. It was time for war. For Rikshasha, this one was personal. I told her it was finally her turn for payback, and for a second all she could whisper was brother. 2 days later, the scouting party that went in expecting a few stray corpses and an easy pullback found something else waiting for them instead, something none of us had planned for. Through my link with Dominique, I felt her square up against the thing Valicious had stitched back together, Mactus's corpse, wearing his old scowl like a mask. She needled it, almost playful. Hadn't it gotten prettier since she'd last seen it? Then it lunged, and she didn't flinch. She just told it to clench its teeth and hit it with everything. But that was just the opening. Dominique wasn't only my general, she ran her own labyrinth too, and she'd been stockpiling a legion for decades just for a moment like this. She called them in, and they swarmed Mactus's reanimated husk whole, tearing him down piece by piece while the horde screamed for undead blood. One of Dominique's little scouts caught up with me before I expected it. "My main body's already fighting the Flood Dragon King's remains," it said. Already, that was earlier than planned. My army was still 2 hard days into its march and worn out, so we weighed sending a small team ahead through a portal instead, dangerous as that'd be this close to the field. She explained her Naga's fight and eat in the same breath, though low-rank undead weren't worth the trouble. Mactus's remains were worth grinding through slow. While I checked on her, Rikshasha rushed in with harder news. Scouts had found Valicius's camp, thousands of undead packed into a valley half a day out, with the Necromancer King standing in the middle of them. Waiting would only cost us. I told Rikshasha we'd hit them now, no rest, and end it quickly. I'd promised her the kill, but the situation had changed, so I decided I'd finish Valicius myself. I lined up my archers, held my breath, and gave the order, fire. Our first volley tore into their front ranks, but there were just too many of them. The undead kept pushing, breaking through wherever we thinned out. My soldiers held the line and told me to go, that they'd manage without me, so I let the smoke swallow me and slipped toward the real target. My second line loosed everything they had, and the volley found something worse waiting in the dark, a gold-plated elite holding this ground, sneering that it made no difference whether we came at him as tribute or trouble. Either way, he promised, we'd all end the same. The gold-plated guardian didn't wait for me to catch my breath. It threw its skull jaw wide and screamed, a sound that ripped straight through the smoke around me. I felt it before I saw it coming, and I knew this fight wasn't going to be a clean one.